The coworker who ruined everything. Wait until you hear about these monsters. I had a colleague who genuinely enjoyed seeing people not do well and enjoyed when people felt uncomfortable. She's very manipulative and is actually quite good at it. She'd ask you questions and sympathize with whatever you had going on, only to turn around and tell everyone what you just confessed to her. After about 2 or 3 months with the company, if she hadn't already somehow screwed you over, you've heard enough about her to know that if you don't want the rest of the room to find out, then you just don't tell her. Yep, I'm talking about you, Carolina. I had a 50-year-old colleague who'd message women on sugar baby apps and scratch his itch over his trousers. Saw him definitely complete in the open office during daytime. He sat next to me. Kept on happening, so I reported it. He said he had a downstairs rash, but admitted to messaging people on social media. I got in trouble for my accusations. Fast forward 8 months, he's sitting opposite me now. He starts scratching his itch out in the open office again, and I recorded him. Showed my manager, and he was finally fired. Don't worry, he was a C-word in plenty of other ways too. I've never understood the office hog-whackers. Like, really? You can't wait until you get home, or at least use a bathroom? That, and the people that view adult movies at work and print out pictures from the websites. The one printing out pictures got fired for cranking it out in our office during a thunderstorm. We had a system admin who'd come to work and run his real estate business from his desk while he was supposed to be working, the whole time coughing and sneezing and sniffling constantly. We called him Itchy. He'd also call friends and family and have hour-long conversations with them while we all had to listen. He picked up the nickname Thanksgiving Dinner Guy for using the break room, a full kitchen, to cook entire meals that wouldn't be out of place at a family gathering. One of the offices in another wing had a sheet by the door for people to log when they saw him and what he was cooking that day. He didn't like any of us, and the feeling was mutual, and he left books like Jerks at Work on his desk. When he finally got fired, they found out he never did any of his system admin work. No backups, no password changes, no log monitoring. I mean, if he could get away with that for that long of a time, then your office definitely had bigger problems than him. He does sound like an irritation, but I'd be more furious at my bosses for managing us normally if that kind of crap is going on without any sort of consequences. She didn't officially work at my store's location. She was supposed to be at another location, training to be a manager there, but her predecessor was still working at said location, and the upper management or boss didn't want too many people working there at once. So she had to work at my store's location instead. Yay. As soon as she started, she had a problem with me. I don't know why, I'll never understand why. I suspect my resting bee face had something to do with it. She essentially bullied me from the get-go, and when I told my manager about it, she claimed nothing could be done since the rude lady wasn't officially under my manager. So one day, the witch starts bumping into me and saying, "You've got a problem with me, let's take it outside." I was half her size. I've never fought in my life outside of sibling squabbles, and I have terrible social anxiety. So I went to the bathroom, called my significant other to come and pick me up, grabbed my things and walked out on my shift. I didn't say a word to anyone and I left her there alone during lunch rush. I later learned from my friend who also worked there that my manager didn't blame me and officially, like on paper, said that I left for personal reasons. She was a nice woman and I don't blame her for not being able to do anything. Upper management at this chain was very irresponsible and didn't seem to care about that store location whatsoever. The checks came in late almost every week, we weren't allowed to have more than 2 people working in the store at the time, didn't always have enough budget to order food or supplies and stuff. I'm never working for that man's chain again. I may work at the same store, but I'm not going to work if it's one of the locations that butthole owns. She almost got me fired because she wanted to find the weakest-looking guy to be her little errand boy. When I politely told her to go screw herself, she told HR that I'd been taking work out of her queue in the system. It wasn't a very good lie though, because why would I want to do more work than I have to? I even said this to HR in the disciplinary meeting. Nothing came of it. They just called it a dispute and everyone carried on. I got fired later for not being great at the job in the end. She left to go and do something else. 2 or 3 years later, she saw me in a local bar and said, "Oh my goodness, hi, I haven't seen you for ages," as if nothing had happened. I totally ignored her. You can't try to get someone fired and then act like nothing happened. Girl I worked with when I was a personal shopper. She tried to get me fired a couple of times because she saw I was moving up faster than her. We both got sent to work at a different location for a couple of months, and she went around bad-mouthing me to anyone who'd listen, so they thought I was a crappy employee and that she was amazing. I proved myself with my work ethic, and they realized she was a liar, and it definitely changed their opinion of her. I ended up going to a different location, and when she went back to our original location, she continued to say horrid things about me. My coworkers took my side and called her out on her BS. She left not long after on a bad note with them. He was in his 50s and had often uncontrolled diabetes. He was 6'4" tall. I was 24 and a foot shorter. Normally, he was a teddy bear, but when his blood sugar got low, he could get violent. He tried throwing punches at me for suggesting he get a Coke from the vending machine in the hall. Good thing he's slow and clumsy in that state. When we were in the truck together once and it started making a weird sound, I wanted to take it into the shop and he insisted we didn't need to by yelling at me and pounding his fist on the dash. But we were going to a remote area and I didn't want to have to try and find help if the truck broke down and the radio didn't work. I had to call search and rescue on him once because he didn't come back to the truck after doing a transect or a biology job. You guessed it, he had low blood sugar and wasn't able to find his way back. He had no education or experience in biology, but he just couldn't be fired from his job driving a plow. With his propensity to let himself get hypoglycemic, he couldn't drive either. So they shuffled him to the wildlife department because he had an interest in wildlife. I was basically his babysitter. Would he be remorseful once his blood sugar got back up? No, he never even once acknowledged it. Okay, I can confirm he's just a butthole then. You almost always remember the experience afterwards unless it gets really bad, like loss of consciousness or seizure bad. As a type 1 diabetic who's had many a severe low blood sugar episode, you can become very angry or confused in that state, but I've never even thought to hurt someone who was trying to help me. I've sometimes said or done embarrassing things, but nothing of this guy's caliber. I work with a woman who's threatened by other women, especially if they're younger and have more education than her. She constantly tries to discourage women from furthering their education and constantly tries to get women she's threatened by fired. She's a goddamn nightmare. Okay, after reading the comments, I'm so sad to see that so many people have dealt with the same issue. I hope that you're all in better work environments now, or will be soon. I have a friend that went to work for a big Silicon Valley company. She feels threatened by older employees like this, while at the same time, from what she describes and from what I know about her, she's becoming this type of woman too. She's talented, but also gets validation through her work. It doesn't help that Silicon Valley seems cutthroat to the extent that your coworkers feel more like rivals gunning for your position than colleagues. I've had to be like, no, the 22-year-old coming out of college with good ideas isn't necessarily a threat just because she's got 5 years of newer innovation to study than you. Focus on what you do yourself. I don't have the nerves for that sort of job. Feeling like everyone is out to get you at any given time just seems exhausting to me. Luckily, all of my office jobs in life have been dull and uninteresting to anyone else. Frankly, I'd be more appalled that they wanted to take my job so badly. Like, why? I used to work part-time at a shipping warehouse, and at one point, we ended up hiring this 16-year-old kid. He made a ton of mistakes that we ended up having to fix for him, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt at first, just because he was new. But not only did he never learn from his screw-ups, he was incredibly lazy and lacked any self-awareness. There were instances where he was given a task, but then he'd either sit around on his phone most of the time, hide out in the bathroom for like 45 minutes and then hope we wouldn't notice, or just whine to my supervisor that he didn't want to do whatever he was assigned. Because of that, he'd often take half the day to do like 30 minutes of work, and would then complain that he had too much work piled on top of him. It was ridiculous. He lasted maybe a month before my supervisor let him go. I had 2 coworkers like that at my college job as a theater lighting technician. For a semester, the 3 of us were always on shift together, and every time I turned around from doing the actual job, the 2 of those guys were effing around together or on their phones. The worst time was once when I was up a tall ladder changing out lenses. One of them was supposed to be footing the ladder, the other was supposed to be taking the lenses I removed as I passed them down and handing me up the new ones to install. I looked around with a lens and they were both on the other side of the theater, having wandered away in conversation, not even looking at me. If that ladder had toppled, I doubt they would have even noticed. Not as bad as some, but I'll never forget the 22-ish-year-old girl who spent hours of one shift telling me, with no prompting at all, how she used to be a raging smack addict, but she was over it now and had become extremely religious. She went into very explicit detail about her substance deals and the things she had done to get the stuff. My shy, homeschooled butt was stunned. The very next day, she got fired for stealing $20 from the cash register. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The 50-something turd that was the owner's son. Spoiled brat reminded me constantly who he was if I stood up to him. Creepy as hell too. Could never just tell any of the women they looked nice. Actually told me one day that my legs looked nice because I was wearing a skirt. So that was the last time I wore a skirt to work for a long time. I immediately started looking for a new job within a month. There were so many other things that occurred, I was turned off from working for a small family-owned business since. Yeah, I'm just picturing a 50-year-old John Ralphio. Had an assistant who plotted to get me fired and take my job. Some of my workers let me know because he tried to get them on board with him. Eventually, due to politics, I was demoted, but asked to be put on the shift relieving him. We'd work 12-hour shifts on the weekends. After being relieved by phone a couple of times, against the rules, I intentionally came in 4 hours early, and he was nowhere on site. I still got a call from him when he should have relieved me like he was still on site. I let the guards know and they videotaped him, and I got him fired. I briefly had a coworker at my current job at a local grocery store. We'll just call him Fred. Fred is one of those people who's always talking on his phone in the break room, and that's my personal pet peeve at work. More often than not, he's usually arguing with his girlfriend, and he doesn't seem to care that anyone's listening. He'd do other annoying, gross things like chewing with his mouth wide open and wiping his boogers all over the place, but then there was one day when he tried to flush a Hot Pocket down the toilet. Needless to say, that didn't play out so well, and that temporarily put an end to our closest employee restroom right by the break room. He surprisingly didn't get fired over that, but he did get fired when one of his old high school teachers came in shopping and he threw a whole sack of potatoes at her. She was an elderly woman who got seriously injured, and both the ambulance and the cops had to get involved. I never did hear what happened to his old teacher, but Fred, on the other hand, is currently in jail for not only attacking his teacher, but he also apparently attacked his lawyer for reasons unknown. That's our Fred! Former supervisor. A bully, gossip, and an all-round terrible person that picked one or two people to be her punching bags. My introduction to her was when I was sitting at lunch and she came barreling at one of my coworkers and proceeded to literally scream and curse in his face in the break area. She also had a habit of gossiping in the warehouse office in full hearing of other people, which made me uncomfortable. It's one thing when a coworker gossips to another. It's an entirely different thing when a supervisor gossips about those under them to others. I actually casually mentioned this to a different supervisor, that it made me uneasy to be in the office while this was going on, and she got wind of it, and then decided to make me her target. Over the span of 6 months, she bullied me and behaved in some really disrespectful ways. She gossiped about me. How did I find out? Well, she started doing it in front of me. She gave me a very unflattering nickname. I found out when she blurted it out one time when I came into the office after being paged. She was passive-aggressive towards me in all respects. Growled at me in the ladies' locker room, put papers to cover her face so I couldn't look at her, sighed or scoffed when I tried to engage in conversation with other people, not her, and ignored me or outright walked away when I needed a supervisor override. She told me I needed to step it up with my work. I was the second most productive with the second lowest fault rate at my department. To give you an idea, on a typical day, first would also do 25 jobs and I would be at 23. The other 5 people averaged 15 jobs apiece. I finally had a breakdown after she started doing it in front of the other supervisors and the manager. This was a week after I told the manager again about her behavior. Nothing was being done about it. I was ready to just walk off the job and had a breakdown. Someone told the manager's boss that I was having a breakdown and she called me directly to find out what was going on. I was walked through an official HR report that went to the front office. She was given one last chance. I told them she wouldn't last a month. 3 weeks later, she had a screaming match with another employee and was suspended and subsequently fired. I later found out she was directly responsible for 3 people quitting and 1 person getting fired because they couldn't take it anymore and threw gloves at her. I'm mostly just breathtaken that some of these people last so long without their bosses firing them themselves. Like, this isn't a good thing to have in your office, and does anyone really like a person like this? Sounds like other people were reporting them the whole time, and like, what is your rationale behind keeping them? What is happening out there? She was a lady in her 50s. We worked at a doctor's office. Nothing was ever her fault. She couldn't take even the nicest constructive criticism and constantly complained about everything. One of my nicest coworkers ever, who was around the same age, so this isn't an ageism thing, she often was the recipient of her blame, and because she never took responsibility, it was regularly the same issues she never learned to correct. They bickered a lot after a couple of years of this. One day, the nice coworker went to the car to grab her anxiety meds, and the obnoxious one went to the office manager and then HR saying she thought the nice one went to get a weapon to hurt her. Like, what? She didn't even own a weapon. And the nice one got fired. I was absolutely shocked. Any lingering respect I had for her was gone. I've had a lot of jobs and met some crappy people, but she was the most stressful nightmare who could boo-hoo her way into getting pity parties on cue. It took me way too long to figure this out. The hyper-complainers are constantly in the boss's ears about any and everything they thought they could use to stand on other employees in their ongoing efforts to make themselves look good. I've never worked for a business owner that was stupid or inept, and I was sure that they could see right through the lazy, corrupt, constant complainers and recognize them as the drag on business that they were. But without fail, time after time, the one talking all of the crap got away with their destructive behavior. They'd run off the hard-working, ethical employees as quickly as possible while protecting the worst employees, many of whom were thieving the company, and the customers and their co-workers. It was a horrible thing to learn that whoever talks the most crap to the owners always won and stayed on to embezzle their way to retirement. The absolute worst was a guy I worked with for nearly a decade. He was a monster, prone to fits of rage that included throwing chairs, monitors, and knocking over large shelving racks where expensive merchandise was stored, while belittling his department employees as though he were a fifth grader. I always knew that one day the owner would recognize how crappy a human being he really was and send him packing. I left the company after a decade, but stayed in touch with the owners and other managers as I felt we were friends. I stopped by at that old store to visit a decade after I left to hear that they'd finally fired the guy. He had embezzled a couple of $100,000 from that business in the course of the 20 years that he had worked there. The real insult hit when the owners came to talk to me and said, "We had to fire so-and-so when we discovered that he'd stolen nearly $250,000 for us. Can you believe he'd do such a thing?" My response cost me every friend that I had at that business because I said, "Hell yeah, do I believe he'd do that? It was right up his alley, and he couldn't have displayed his disdain for you and your business with his complete lack of respect to everyone here, and his profound lack of ethics in any aspect of his life any clearer. I just hate that it took you 20 years to see who he really was while everyone that worked for or around him could see how crappy he was in 3 weeks or less. I just couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for them or feign sympathy or shock at how he betrayed them. I even gave them a quick count list of nearly 50 employees that left the company because of his BS, and noted that you were or are very angry at those that went to become direct and formidable competitors. I mean, it's easy to compete when you don't have to cover that guy's losses all the time. Whenever someone is talking mad crap to the bosses or other employees, you have to immediately put a stop to it and confront every single thing they say, because once they plant enough dishonest misinformation, they'll be believed as gospel despite the mountains of evidence to the contrary. So every time that whiny coworker goes into the boss's office to complain about you and everyone else in private, you and everyone else is likely being found guilty without the luxury of knowing the accusations or having the chance to defend yourself and clear the air. Do the exact thing they do, or it will become gospel and pile up until it's a gigantic steaming pile of crap about you. In civil service, there was this one woman who 1. Actively hit other people, 2. Changed entered times on timesheets without the original party's consent, which is a huge no-no legally, by the way, and 3. Sabotaged my work and other people's. No matter how many complaints we submitted, she was never fired. Rumor had it she was never fired because she had some serious dirt on the administration, the kind that couldn't be leaked to the press. This was a person that was in the aircraft qualification training squadron at the same time as me. He wasn't an intentionally terrible person, but his lack of self-awareness made any interaction around him difficult and exhausting. He washed out of another flying career field. In the first simulations, before the flying phase, he refused to use established procedures, resulting in degraded ability to provide required data to external players. Managed to fail his first instructional ride despite it being nearly impossible to fail if you just show up. He couldn't figure out how to take leave despite several people walking him through the process. Rather than trying to solve any problem, he'd announce it to the rest of the room, and if nobody jumped in to help him, he'd just ask the nearest person. He managed to frustrate and time-jack the kindest instructor I know because he didn't have a basic understanding of a training airspace. In a bid to get back to more pressing and more likely to be completed tasks, he gave me an apologetic look as he suggested that Lieutenant Smith was a smart student and could probably help him get up to speed. I could not. Nobody could.
Doctors have read it? What was a symptom a patient didn't mention that was really important? 16-year-old came in with blood pressure of 60/30, pale as a ghost, tons of free fluid in his abdomen on ultrasound. Turns out he had a metastatic testicular cancer that had eroded into his aorta and was bleeding into his belly. Come to find out later, he had testicle lumps and was too scared to tell anyone. I had a guy come to the hospital who told me he had seizures every Tuesday like clockwork. This is highly unusual for somebody with a seizure disorder. It wasn't until I asked him about his social history that he told me he's a heavy drinker. I further investigated, and it turns out he binge drinks Thursday, Friday, Saturday every week, then stops cold turkey. He was having withdrawal seizures. Black stools. Folks, if you're having black poops, for God's sake, mention that sooner rather than later. This lady had been seeing nothing but black for months before she thought to mention anything. We found several gastric ulcers and a hemoglobin level that circled the drain. Medical intern here. Had a woman come to ER complaining about stomach pain. Took her full history, did the exam and vitals. She seemed fine, mild fever. Made a preliminary diagnosis of gastrointestinus and presented to my doctor. My doctor, who's female, goes to her and asks why she came to the ER for something so mild. She says because she noticed blood in her stool. The doc comes out and asks me if I asked about her stool. I did, and she said it was fine. And I asked specifically about blood. She goes back in and asks the patient why she didn't mention that to me, and her response, I didn't think it was appropriate to say it to a male intern. Turns out she had ulcerative colitis, needed a colonoscopy and long-term medical therapy and possibly surgery. Guys, when it comes to medical professionals, don't feel the need to be ashamed. I can almost guarantee they have seen or heard way worse than whatever you have to tell them. I had a patient whose main complaint was a wrist sprain. Asked how he fell, and he said he felt lightheaded and fell down the stairs. After about 15 minutes of questions about his heart and other stuff, I asked him if he's had any vomiting. He said he vomits every day. I ask if it's red, and he says it's bright red every time. The kicker is, this was his usual yearly appointment. Dude was vomiting blood every day, and not only did not go to the ER, he didn't feel it was worth mentioning at his checkup. Chest pain. Guy denied ever having chest pain. Ever. Told us he was able to chop wood and work on his land without any issues. He didn't meet any criteria for additional workup prior to surgery. During his major surgery, he had a huge heart attack. A cardiac cath showed that he basically had one very narrow coronary artery that was the only thing getting blood to his heart. His daughters, who were nurses, all swore up and down that he was healthy as a horse and never complained of heart issues. Then his black sheep other daughter arrived and said he actually had told her that he has terrible exertional chest pain every time he did anything, but that he didn't want his daughters to know because they would worry. He died a few days later. If we had known about his symptoms, he would have likely had his cardiac disease diagnosed and treated prior to surgery. I had a patient who needed a small sterile procedure done but had a latex allergy, and it was in bright red all over her chart. We used paper charts back then. We had just ran out of latex-free sterile gloves. I went in to tell her she needed to come back in a week when we got them back. Then I decided to ask what happened when she came into contact with latex. Her response? I get chlamydia. I'm sorry. What? What is this story? Is this woman serious? Did my sub-I on a level 1 trauma ED a few years ago as a 4th-year med student. Homeless guy with Hep B, Hep C, and HIV came in talking about a rash on his shoulder. how it hurt, had been pretty hot out, and that was where he was slinging his bag on. Looked okay, figured it was for a sweat rash, he was really in there for food, so was going to give him some cream and a sandwich and send him out the door. Was about to leave when I looked at his chief complaint again, and it also had testicular pain. So I asked him what was going on with his testicles. Lifts up the gown, and he has a tracking abscess through his scrotal skin and through one of his testicles. It was like a worm burrowing through an apple. Oh, I guess it's okay. Ended up calling urology and infectious disease, and the guy ended up leaving against medical advice because we were making him NPO without food in anticipation of surgery. I'm a med student, and on my family medicine rotation, I was sent to see this woman before the doctor and get a history and physical. She was saying she was having heartburn and just wanted us to give her something to throw up so she would feel better. I thought it was odd, and so I went through some more review questions, and she said her reflux pain was extending up the left side of her neck and down her left arm, and that she'd been sweating for hours. I cut off my interview short there and went to my teaching doctor to tell him everything and what I thought. Got an EKG. Yeah, she was having a heart attack. Had to call an ambulance and get her to the ER. Had a guy who was sent in because his family was concerned about him, mainly because he was getting into a lot of physical altercations. Appointment with the patient was normal. He was able to talk himself out of most issues his family stated were occurring. And as we were ending, he said he had to pick up his other truck from the shop. I asked him, "Oh, you own 2 trucks?" He replied, "I own 5 trucks." The guy was military and only made 60 to 70K a year. Come to find out, he had bipolar disorder, and in his manic episodes, he would just take out a large loan to buy a new truck. He had almost 120K in debt in just trucks. If it wasn't for that last part of him mentioning he was getting his truck, I would have sent him home and probably never known he had a psychiatric issue. Saw a patient during a follow-up for a gynecological cancer. She said she felt great. Exam was normal. She was relieved, but she was so anxious it set off my medical spider sense, so to speak. I decided to push a bit further, which led to this conversation. "So, you said you felt good? Absolutely nothing else bothering you?" "Oh, some small things. Nothing having anything to do with this." "Well, why don't you tell me anyway?" "Well, I kind of have this weird lump on my belly. A sweat gland or greasy nodule or something. Doesn't really bother me, but I might get a dermatologist to have a look at it if it ever needs to be removed." "Ah, I see. Could you show it to me?" She showed me, and I saw a skin metastasis, clear as day. Don't know how the story ended because I moved to different service immediately after. But if I had to guess, her life expectancy was probably measured in months. Admitted a baby my intern year that had transferred to our facility for persistent vomiting following a surgery on a part of the intestinal tract. The transferring facility had wanted us to start the baby on a form of intravenous nutrition and offhandedly mentioned some low-grade laboratory abnormalities that they had attributed to the baby just having had surgery. I go into the room in the middle of the night, the first representative of our medical team to meet the family, and in the process of gathering the history, ask the family what color the baby's poop was. The family replied that it was white or gray and had been since birth, and that they just thought that's how it should be. Record scratch. Big red flag. We ultimately diagnosed the baby with a rare genetic disorder that required an organ transplant. A few months ago, a woman, 36 years old, consulted to endocrinology because she was getting fat without a change in her diet and she felt different. Asking more questions, she casually mentioned she hadn't had her menstruation for months and that maybe she was menopausic. At 36, we suggested that she might be pregnant and she said it was a stupid idea and that she knew she was not pregnant. We did some analysis and ecography and yep, 35 weeks pregnant. You give birth at around 40. I was once rounding on a patient in the morning that had come in for a stroke. I decided to ask some basic review of the symptoms questions just out of habit. And when I asked about changes in vision, he said yes. I probed further and he told me that he was using eye drops for something, but that he forgot his eye drops at home 3 days ago when he came to the hospital. For the last 3 days, the vision in his left eye was worsening along with eye pain and pressure. When I called his pharmacy to see what drops he was using, as I suspected, they were for glaucoma, and he was having worsening vision loss due to untreated glaucoma, increasing his intraocular pressure. We got a no pathology consult stat. Medic here ran a call to a general sick person call and arrived to find a slender lady in her 80s. She wasn't feeling well and her granddaughter finally called 911. We run through our assessment and aren't finding much to go on. And then, me. Anything happened recently, like a fall or a trip or something like that?
Well, I fell a few days ago and hit my head, but I wasn't feeling bad until a couple hours ago.
Oh, okay. And you took all of your meds since the fall?
Well, no, I didn't take them yesterday, just today.
This morning, like usual?
Well, no, I took them around 2 hours ago.
Including the blood thinner? Oh, shnikes. Yelled to the other guys to grab the gurney. I didn't even need her to answer. I knew exactly what was happening the second she told me she took her meds right before she started feeling off. Subdural bleed. Didn't even matter how fast we drove. And we drove fast. She lost consciousness shortly after we got to the ER and probably never regained it. The blood thinner accelerated the bleed and she expired from it. It was such a terrible situation. Her granddaughter was really confused and scared at the sudden shift in our demeanor. It was such a large bleed and textbook case presentation that it was used as a case study for our quality improvement training. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I had an elderly gentleman come in because he fell in his kitchen. Didn't lose consciousness or anything. Didn't have any signs of trauma, but both eyes were slightly swollen, which he had said happened before the fall. Oh, and he forgot to tell me he also had a sore throat. He wouldn't have even brought it up if I hadn't asked why his voice sounded a little muffled. Took a close look at his throat. He had some pretty significant pharyngeal edema. He ended up having what's called angioedema, which explains the throat and eye swelling. Different from an allergic reaction. He ended up getting intubated and sedated and went to the ICU to protect his airway. He initially came in because of a completely inconsequential fall and got intubated and admitted to the ICU because of an "oh, by the way, doc" moment. Not a people doctor, but I worked as a vet tech for 3 years. Had a little tiny mini shih tzu in horrible health with a nasty attitude to match. You could seriously barely touch the dog, and she was very, very sick. The only reason we were able to do anything for her was because she was so small. The owner comes to visit her one afternoon and casually mentions to us that she's deaf. Poor thing was scared out of her mind and did remarkably better once we learned to let her know we were there before touching her. As a primary care doctor, we try to keep to our tight schedules. It can be difficult when patients could come in with something complex or with a shopping list of things that they want to talk about. And balancing this with providing good care and being mindful that the next patient will be waiting in 15 minutes for their appointment, we can be notorious for being late for these reasons. I saw a patient the other day who said she had a runny nose. I just got on with it, made sure she didn't have any signs of a more serious illness, and gave her some advice on what to do. After that, she also had a pain in her ankle she quickly wanted checked out. I couldn't find much wrong and assured her it would probably be okay in a couple days. Now her 15 minutes is up and I'm kinda gesturing her that we're finished. Then she pauses and says, "Okay, I just wanted to get those things checked out. The main reason I'm here is that I've been having chest pain all morning." God, I face-palmed. I had a patient come in with a neck mass. There was enough off that he got the beginnings of a malignancy and infection workup that was remarkable for the mass being a hematoma. Then he remembered he was in a car accident and the seatbelt was where said mass was. I was discharging an elderly man in a wheelchair who had been treated for a urinary tract infection. At the end of the conversation, I suddenly realized, somewhat embarrassingly, that nothing in his papers told me why he was in a wheelchair. So I asked, "Why are you in a wheelchair?" "Because I can't walk," he answered. "Well, fine, but why can't you walk?" "I don't know." "Okay, how long have you been in a wheelchair?" "Since I was admitted last Sunday." "Okay." At some point, everybody in health experiences how difficult it can be to get information from patients. A good tip is to ask specific questions. So I followed up with, "Did you have any problems walking a month ago?" "Oh, no problems. I went for daily walks." At this point, I had to get up and do a neurological exam, and found almost total loss of motoric and sensoric function in the lower extremities. Turns out he had a metastatic cancer compressing his spinal cord, and since he hadn't mentioned his quickly deteriorating legs, he had just been put in a wheelchair at admission with no further questions asked. As a kid, I was always out of breath and could hardly do any physical activity. When I would run or laugh hard or go up the stairs, my arms and legs would tingle. Thought I mentioned that to my parents a few times, but at the doctor, all that was ever said was I wasn't very active. Ended up passing out in gym class at age 8 and being diagnosed with a cardiovascular problem about a month before it would have killed me. The tingling and dizziness should have been a good clue. Not so much a symptom, but a medication missing from their health records that produced symptoms of poor bone grafting. In my dental office, and basically any dental office, we ask you to fill out a health history form and sign it. We'll again ask you at x-rays about any medications or health concerns. We will again ask you about what medications you're taking before any procedures. We will ask you again each and every time you visit the office, even if we just saw you yesterday as your last appointment. This man came in for several implants. This has multiple stages, which means multiple visits. We asked countless times upon each visit about his health records, health history, and medication. Nothing. Okay, that's great. But guess who had many failed implants, pain, and bone issues develop? Every implant failed. We only found out what the heck was going on when we were scratching our heads trying to understand why a healthy person was having bone problems, and asked him if it was fine for us to contact his physician, and from his physician we found out about his medication and made the connections right away. The medication he was on greatly prevents proper bone health. We would have changed our entire treatment plan if he had mentioned his medication he was taking. We even explained the treatment plan several times and asked if there were health problems so many times, and he stated no health problems. At least if he had stated a health problem, we could have researched what medications are used for it and prevented issues. He required bone grafting, and proper bone health is imperative. He spent thousands and then blamed us. He's forcing our doctor to do thousands of free work on damages because of his mistake. So much money, pain, and problems could have been prevented if this man just told us what damn pill he fed himself each night before bed. I'm an EMS worker, and one day my 62-year-old neighbor calls me up and tells me to bring my blood pressure thingy. She's a retired cop and one of the coolest people you'll ever hope to meet. She's also stubborn as a mule, so I'm thinking immediately that if she's asking me for a once-over, things are not swell. So I head up with my cuff and stethoscope and ask her what's up. She tells me she's felt off for a few days, dizzy at odd times and exhausted. I take her blood pressure as she's sitting in her chair, and it's fairly normal, but she's still acting off. Her eyes are red-rimmed, she's pale, and then I notice a bruise on her chin. I ask her about it. She tells me about getting up to go to the bathroom the night before, and the last thing she recalled was walking back into her bedroom. She woke up later on the floor. In my world, that's just cause for a ride in our Weep-Whoop mobile. But again, we're not dealing with your average little old lady. So I'm essentially now trying to convince her gently that she needs a doctor's opinion. I did a couple of quick tests to rule out a stroke, and she passed with flying colors. I do a postural, where someone goes from sitting to standing and you check their blood pressure to see if they're compensating, and she's down a solid 20 points, but is of course playing it down as not a big deal. As we're negotiating, I tell her, look, you wouldn't call me up here for nothing, so we need to figure this out. Then it finally comes out. She's had dark and tarry stools and vomit. Well, that was the end of negotiation. Ambulance was called and she was rushed to the ER, where she was immediately given a blood transfusion because of a massive GI bleed. I'm still surprised her blood pressure was within normal ranges both times, but I've chalked it up to the amount of vinegar she has in her. Guys, I had to say Weep-Whoop mobile like 15 times because I couldn't say it without laughing. Nurse here. Had a man come in complaining of urinary retention, which could be because of his age. He left out the weakness and numbness in his legs that had been going on for almost a month during all of his assessments. These assessments were by both doctors, urologists, and nurses. He always denied any other symptoms besides urinary retention. He suddenly stopped being able to feel or move below his belly button. MRI of his back showed cancer into his spinal column, and he died 8 months later. So, triage nurse doing phone triage. Member had high blood pressure, 180/90, due to not taking blood pressure pills. This was not outside her unmedicated baseline. I asked if she was having shortness of breath or chest pain. She said no. Booked her a same-day appointment after talking with her provider. She was having a heart attack with both chest pains and breathing issues when she came to her appointment. Don't lie, people, seriously. I don't understand why you would seek out medical attention and then not be honest about the symptoms that you're having. You're not doing yourself any favors. You clearly came here for a reason. Speak up. Exhaustion. Not just being really tired at the end of the day, but unable to function exhaustion. I would wake up in the morning and then 2 hours later need to take a nap that would sometimes last until 3 or 5 in the afternoon. I told my doctor and she ran blood tests, thinking it was my thyroid, but nothing came back abnormal. I was 29 years old. She kind of shrugged and figured it was hormones. A few months later, I noticed rectal bleeding. Went back to the doctor to be told it was hemorrhoids and just waited out. Turns out it was stage 3 rectal cancer. I was cancer-free for almost 3 years until it reappeared in my lung. Now I'm stage 4 and about to begin immunotherapy. I'm lucky because my disease is regulated to only a tiny spot, and I have a rare mutation that qualifies me for immunotherapy, but it's still an absolutely terrifying situation. Feeling extremely tired all the time is one of the first notable symptoms of some cancers. Please don't let your doctors ignore it. Kind of tying back to what one of our previous posters said, unfortunately, yes, a lot of the times these doctors are on a tight schedule and need to get to their next patient as quickly as possible. It's not that they don't care or aren't looking close enough, it's just that they feel a lot of stress due to their time constraints. And especially with something like exhaustion, I feel like it's very easy to go unnoticed. We all have to be careful and keep an eye out for ourselves. If you feel like something is wrong, talk to your doctor.
Ugly dudes with hot wives. How did you do it? By being hot when I was younger. I've aged horribly while my wife has aged like fine wine. I feel you. My last 3 years, I've aged like 10 years. I've avoided aging for so long. My wife keeps getting prettier. Men also don't do the daily upkeep that most straight women do. That could account for it. I laughed at that last comment because it seems like that person thinks that gay women don't have a skin routine. Hell, I've seen gay men with better skin than some women. Smoke and mirrors. She thinks I'm hot, but it's all confidence and superficial charm. It's been 21 years and I've been white-knuckling this whole relationship hoping she doesn't notice that I'm a fat dork. I stalked your profile. You're a pretty handsome dude. Nice beard, man. You and your wife look great together. Thanks, she's got a banging body and puts her right out of my league, but she won't let me post those pics as proof. I think Pete Davidson has shown everyone that looks don't matter when it comes to getting women. And that's not me talking crap. He has a joke about it. I believe my wife is damn near blind. Wow, this has actually never really occurred to me, but my best relationship I ever had was with a gal who was just shy of being legally blind. I've never really thought about it much. Pretty much been single ever since. Time for you to start hanging out in the Braille section of the library, my dude. My wife has no depth perception and has pretty bad eyesight. The only logical reason is because she can't see me. Now get out of my swamp. In your pictures, I see someone with a lively face and laughing eyes. You look kind enough and your comment tells me you're very humorous. The picture you chose of her and your comment both tell me that you're caring and appreciative towards her. I think you all overestimate the importance of socially accepted good looks. I admit that being actively ugly might be a hindrance, but otherwise it's not really that important. As they say, good looks get you in the door, personality makes them stay and happy. I like to think of it like this. Good looks matter for a lot of hookups, but for actual relationships, personality is far more important. Six-pack abs don't matter as much as good communication skills, the ability to stay calm under pressure, and the willingness to compromise with your partner. I wholeheartedly agree with that last comment. Good-looking people destroy when it comes to the dating scene, but ask them how many good or healthy relationships they've had. If you need more evidence, just look at Hollywood relationships. My wife has terrible taste. If I'm being honest, my wife's gotten hotter over the last 25 years, and I've gotten old. I think her secret is a great skincare routine, exercise, and good genes. I was in high school when that whole Wear Sunscreen song came out in the late 90s. I took that song to heart, wore it every day, and I'm now in my 40s. I'm glad I did. I make her laugh and give great hugs. Great hugs are such an underrated skill. I have a girthy, and I mean massively good sense of humor. Just reading that made me wet, because I snorted while drinking. I blew a load of my coffee all over the table. These comments were small, but they got the job done. My wife told me I have a great sense of humor and can always brighten her day with it. She also said that I really listen to her when we talk. I definitely married up. I actually don't know. It can't be money because my job is one of the worst paying jobs in our country. It's something like 98.5% of full-time jobs make more than mine. And it can't be because of having a huge member, because mine is way below average. If I had to guess, maybe it's because I'm funny, like I think that I'm honest, like way too honest. I don't make much money and have an average PP. Quotes from a man you can trust. You pay attention to the bits other men don't typically pay attention to. My wife last week. She told me to say that I know the motion of the ocean, but as a real answer, I pay attention to the small things. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. We have good communication. I try my best to make her feel loved. I never pressure her into anything, and we encourage each other to keep improving. If we fight, we resolve it pretty quickly, because we're both able to apologize and recognize our fault. It's just about being able to say, hey, I love you and I want to talk this through because I know that we can figure it out together. We've probably had 2 or 3 big fights in our relationship, but we've always sat down and talked about it, warts and all. Spoken like a man that knows the meaning of a relationship. My friend is a short, overweight, dwarven-looking man and has a really hot girlfriend. It's all charisma. I used to run with a guy like that too. He was about 5'6" and over 200 pounds, so short and pudgy. He made okay money, but certainly wasn't rich. Yet he was always with someone you would consider to be way out of his league. How did he manage it? I figure he had 2 things going for him. 1, the guy was genuinely funny. If you're hanging around with this guy, he will keep you laughing nonstop. And 2, confidence. He'll talk to anyone, and if you shoot him down, he'll just chat up your friend without missing a beat. This kind of describes me, but also you would be surprised. There's plenty of women, like my GF, who find short, overweight, dwarven-looking men very attractive. My GF is taller than me and rubs my hairy belly in bed just like I'm a king. And she's quite hot. I like men of all heights, but my ex-husband was shorter than me and my current partner is only a little taller than me. I don't understand the need to have a large, tall man. I'm not looking for a father figure. Lots of wonderful men get overlooked because of this. There's gold in them hills out there, ladies. Part of me feels like this post was made by hobbits. Got a short, overweight, balding friend. We literally call him George Costanza. He's just confident, enthusiastic, and always doing something because he takes his hobbies seriously. His girlfriend seems the opposite, even though she's a smoke show. So it was partly a lucky find, but he also clearly adds substance to anyone's life he's in. He also comes from a very wealthy family, if you need that information. I feel like the wealthy family info is a double-edged sword because on one hand, people will automatically think, oh, she's a gold digger. But then on the other hand, it sucks for those women that are genuinely into a person and not for the money. They get overlooked. How men make us feel while we're in their presence is crucial. Sometimes by virtue of the fact that the guy showing you the attention is hot, you'll feel attractive simply because logic dictates that he could exclusively be chatting up hot women if he wants to be. So he must think you're hot. That rush of emotion wears off real quick if he's got absolutely nothing going on apart from his looks. Doubly fast if he's an arrogant jerk. As multiple people are and have always been saying, if you make us laugh and are pleasant, you're going to make us feel like the most beautiful, captivating woman in the room. That's not a high we want to come down from. Make them laugh, treat them well. Do fun stuff together, do chores, admit when you're wrong, give compliments without prompting, learn what they do and don't like, then put that knowledge to work. Have a handle on your own psychology so you can deal with your own business. Listen twice as much as you talk. This is true. I spent an hour talking to my husband about a book I finished today. I know he wasn't completely interested, but he listened, asked questions, and was engaged. It's the sexiest thing in the world that he cares enough about me just to let me ramble and poorly explain why I love this book. I won't lie to you, when I can have a deep, thoughtful conversation with a woman, it is one of the sexiest things in the world. You know those guys who brag about finishing a pudding cup without a spoon? Well, I can clean out a peanut butter jar. No idea why he's so successful with the ladies, he says, sitting at the end of the bar licking his eyebrows. Let me tell you guys, you're gonna wanna start off like a butterfly landing on a flower and finish like a bulldog eating oatmeal. I like oatmeal. I'm not ugly, but I got a woman way hotter than me to marry me. Turns out, if you have a good personality and are slightly interesting, then you can get away with being a 5. But, the internet tells me that women only want alpha bros with muscles and money that make their bed every morning. Wait a minute. Do we really think that alpha bros make their bed every morning? Unless we think all alpha males are the American Psycho type. I'll give my perspective from the other side. My boyfriend isn't classically handsome. His hairline is receding and the man is a beanpole and somewhat effeminate. Exactly who Andrew Tate claims will never get a woman. But I'm obsessed with him and I'm so glad and proud that he's mine. Why is that? He listens when I talk. He cleans up after himself. He's funny and insightful and above all, kind. He cooks, he's terrible at it, but he tries hard. He's like the most gentle man I've ever met, and because of that, I don't feel the fear I've felt around most other men in my life. My cats love him, he feeds me, he apologizes when he's wrong, and I feel secure enough to admit when I'm wrong too. We talk out every problem as a us versus the problem instead of a me versus him. He gives me space when I need it and attention when I need it too. We just respect each other. Those things aren't hard, but he's the first to check all those boxes. He's 100 out of 10 for me, and I'll grow old and die happily with him. I'll add on to this. My husband is more than a decade older than I am. He has a receding hairline when we met and was working 2 jobs. Our sense of humor is the same, so is our sense of justice. Our dark sides match, and he's great at housework. Then came the hookups. Oh my god, we matched there too. It was over for me. I fell in love. It's still those same qualities that make every day happy and full of laughter. You can't survive the pitfalls of life without being able to laugh. Beauty fades, hair falls out, and wrinkles form. Let's keep spreading the love for good men. My fiance is average to everyone but me. He's overweight, goofy, awkward, and kinda dumb. I say this lovingly, I'm also dumb. Think of the last 2 brain cells meme? That's us. He also makes me laugh every single day. Our childlike qualities align perfectly to keep us happy and well maintained. So we can be goofy idiots all day with each other, and it's fantastic. He embraces my mean streak that comes out playfully, to its full extent, so I can be a little brat. Every flaw I see in myself, he sees as a beauty. He also knows how to handle my mood swings and be so gentle with me on my bad days. He doesn't need to be mothered like many men, loves providing for me, as I do him, and is as sweet as candy. I can't wait to marry him. My husband has been balding since the day we met and it's never bothered me, but damn, he's funny. I made a little joke about a very shocked looking cinder block and he ran with it. We giggled in the car like school kids over a fart. We're both over 30. I have about an extra 20 to 30 pounds and he has a little bit more than that. But when he comes home and hugs me, it's all warm and safe. I've always been one of those guys where people are like, dude, how did you get her? I'm super tall, which probably helps, but I've always been overweight. I'm not exactly sloth. Look up the Goonies, youngsters, you're welcome. But I'm not Marlon Brando either. I'm highly average looking, I do pretty well financially, but you wouldn't know that if you looked at me, my truck, or home, and when I got my wife, I was broke AF. I always tell them that it isn't that hard. Treat them like people you value and respect. Listen to them, take an interest in them and the things that are important to them. Put in some genuine effort and show them you care. It's easier and more effective to constantly do little things to show her how you care than always trying to prove it with some big gesture. Then just take care of yourself. Good hygiene, keep your house and ride clean, have a couple of genuine interests and hobbies. It makes you more interesting and a well-rounded person. Learn to cook. No woman wants a man-child who can't properly feed himself, and I've not met a woman yet that doesn't like a man that can cook. I personally would like to add, don't listen to douchebags. Andrew Tate is the latest one of these, but there's always some popular famous one at any given time. My husband and I met in college. What made me choose him over more conventionally attractive men who were interested in me at the time? He was extremely honest. When we talked, he listened and responded not in a way to try to get with me, but in a way you listen and respond to your best friend. And that's how I knew it was genuine. I don't know how, but I can tell when a guy is trying to prove that he's a good listener for flirty reasons versus actually connecting through the listening. This made me feel so safe and respected. I knew something was different about him. Our very first conversation was about philosophy. By the way, today we've been married for a decade now, and we absolutely laugh like kids together every single day. It sounds stupid, but Bumble. He was from the next town over. I wouldn't normally have talked to him because he didn't put anything on his profile or really fill it out. But something about him seemed kind of like, I don't know, genuine or sweet? I don't know how to explain it. He just turned out to be a bit shy, so it's hard for him to talk about himself to strangers. I'm glad I gave it a shot though. Opposite side here, ugly chick with handsome dude. I let him touch my chesticles. Works 100% of the time. My homie was a nice dude, spent 6 years third wheeling for the fun of it, but in the end glad to see he got married. He said all he did was be funny and things went over time. I feel like the waiting game advice can be bad advice for most men. It's probably better to let your feelings known instead of waiting 6 years and then possibly getting rejected. It being Valentine's Day and all, when my boyfriend and I found each other online, he would make any excuse not to video chat with me. We exchanged pics, he only had 2, but I felt it was necessary to see each other live before meeting. Pics don't show the true person. I was mainly thinking of safety and I was about to bail on him. He sweetly convinced me to be patient and wait to meet in person. I asked why. I thought he was a serial killer or something. He assured me that he wasn't. He simply didn't want my first impression of him to be on video chat. Cautiously, I decided to be patient. We proceeded to text and call each other every day for the next 2 weeks. The texts became love letters and the calls were exciting. I got to know him on a much deeper level, and I thought his voice was so sexy. He made me laugh and he was thoughtful. He was also very kind-hearted, but also very masculine, which I love. He exuded confidence. The chemistry was off the charts. The laughter was constant. When we met for the first time, it didn't matter what he looked like. He was not traditionally handsome by society standards. He was a little overweight, bald, and a bit hunched over. But I think he's gorgeous. He knew exactly what he could offer me and navigated our meeting to allow us to fall in love. Some might think that he was perhaps hiding, but we could have missed out on great love. He is the love of my life. Sometimes he jokes and asks what I see in him, and he calls himself ugly. I remind him of our love story and he smiles. I also remind him that I think he's hot AF. I plan on being his wife one day, because he's the love of my life. Well, it certainly wasn't my pee-pee size or money. Neither of those are worth bragging about. I treated her like a good friend, not an object of infatuation. That caught her attention. I got her to fall in love with me by proving to be well-rounded in my life and very capable. As Red Green would say, if the woman don't find you handsome, make sure they find you handy. Have a sense of humor, especially about yourself, and be comfortable laughing. Listen, clean the house, be kind to animals and service workers. The bar is incredibly, and I mean staggeringly, low. I'm not an ugly guy per se, but I'm stone cold average at best. I'm totally forgettable, but my wife is hot. She's actually attracting attention. She's the kind of woman that men buy things for out of the blue. I listen to her, I share chores with her, I take care of her, I encourage her to do things that make her happy. I spend time with her, and I show interest in the things that she has interest in. Wait, guys are buying things for your wife out of the blue? Yep, she was at the mall with her mother one day, and the guy in line behind her bought her food. A couple of times last year, she had guys at the water park buying her soft drinks. Once she was watching the kids at the pool on vacation, a guy bought popsicles for the kids, shot daggers at me when I walked up and sat beside her. I've long lost count of how many drinks have been bought for her at bars, even once when they realized I was there. Stuff like that. Don't get me started on how often guys come up and just chat with her. Shout out to this guy for just rolling with the punches. I know so many jerks that would get mad at their girls because they're too attractive. Complete idiots. I load the dishwasher instead of leaving my crap in the sink. She finds it hot as hell. I can lick my eyebrows. To be honest, very attractive women sometimes get less attention than you'd think, because guys think that they're just out of their league or something. So the first step to dating anyone is actually putting yourself out there and asking. Nothing's foolproof, but you'd be surprised at the results sometimes, since a lot of guys just self-reject out of being a contender because they don't think they have a shot. That's a huge piece of advice that I've gotten from some more charismatic friends. If you're interested in someone, don't reject yourself. I can honestly say I have objectively the most attractive wife out of my friend group. I was also the one who had no fear at all of rejection. And practice helps to get over those fears. Friend told me back in the day that I went on far more dates than anyone he knew or ever heard of. It doesn't guarantee that the person you fall in love with will be great looking, but if you never talk to anyone, them odds are zero. In regards to the don't reject yourself comment, take that a step further and apply it to everything in life. It will be a huge benefit, trust me. As a longtime restaurant employee, I believe I've seen many cooks and dishwashers unlock the secret. Feed them and agree when they're mad at someone. Honestly, the weight of my heart is definitely through my stomach. My wife is very shy and reserved. I think I was just the only guy that didn't scare her off. I hit the perfect balance of pursuing her and giving her space. Like feeding a wild cat. Until I eventually lured her to a church by the altar. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and her glasses prescription wasn't up to date. Guys that have never been with an attractive woman, and probably not many women in general, will say money. Guys that have been with attractive partners, being funny, treat women with respect, being a decent human being, that's what they do. Yeah, I can confirm, I know plenty of guys that don't have money that have gotten plenty of women. I love these threads because every woman in here is like, he's super nice, he's kind, loves dogs and kids and tips at the restaurant, has a passion for insert benign hobby here, and takes things in stride. He doesn't have a fragile ego and isn't insecure. Just be chill and girls will like you because you aren't dangerous and a liability prone to violence. And the guys in this thread are like, ugh, must be rich, must have a huge wiener. I just have no idea what else it could be because women lie so much and just aren't smart enough to know what they really want. It happens every time. I am very lucky that she was super interested in me from the start. I was just too stupid to notice at first. All worked out in the end. I'm still extremely happy with her. I was just myself and I kept being myself, and that is the key. I see guys pretending to be someone they're not, and that is a big mistake, man. I do think many men overthink that they need to be someone to attract women. At the end of the day, do you want an attractive girlfriend, or do you want someone that'll accept you for who you are? If you just be yourself, you might get both. Be good at cooking, your job, and just generally being good at social functions you both agree with. It's called communication. The ways you're good at these things can vary, but generally people are looking, hopefully, for someone who complements your weaknesses, appreciates your strengths, and you can genuinely be at your most comfortable with. My source? Been with my wife for 15 years from ages 21 to 36. My fiance is absolutely stunning, and to be honest, I'm like medium ugly, but I made her laugh like no other man could hope to, and just treated her well and respected her. I've learned to realize that hot women care more about personality than average looking women. I was a late bloomer, went from a 4 on a good day to a 7 or maybe an 8 thanks to genetics and heavy lifting. We get handsome, but holy hell does it not start that way. I met my wife when I was in my early 20s. She was 19. She was one of those girls that just glows, insanely gorgeous. During our first date, I was absolutely certain she was going to just get up and leave. She didn't. After a few days, I asked her why she hadn't run away yet. She said, "I like you for you." She surprised me at work one day by bringing lunch for a picnic, and several of my coworkers said, "How the hell did you land her?" It wasn't money, although I do have a solid career and decent money. In 10 years of marriage, my wife has asked for practically nothing, and she's as anti-materialistic as you can get. I was just myself and somehow lucked out in finding a girl who was looking for that. I won't lie, I had some depressing encounters with women prior to meeting my wife. Never had a real date even until her. When I was 17, I had a girl walk into a restaurant, see me, and leave. I asked out a classmate in college and she said the dreaded, haha, ew, no. Plenty of stories. It was sad. Man, always hearing stories about people seeing someone and then just leaving is always sad to hear.
Doctors and nurses of Reddit who've delivered babies to mothers who clearly cheated on their husbands, what was that like? We had a very sweet, blonde-haired, blue-eyed mom and dad along with their entire extended family in the room for a delivery one busy afternoon at work. Think aunts, uncles, cousins, grandma, and grandpa too. The baby's born, and as the doctor places her on the mom's chest, the first words out of her mouth are, "That's not my baby! That's not my baby!" The baby in question, still attached at the umbilical cord, has beautiful, dark, curly black hair and dark skin. The nurse looks at her and tells her that this is definitely her baby because she's still attached to you. And she, not so quietly, tells the nurse, "There's no way! I never slept with a black man. It's not mine." The father is standing there silent, not sure what to do. A long, awkward silence fills the room. We clean her and the baby up as cheerfully as we can. We see the extended family filter out of the room and the father leaves to get a cigarette. About 10 minutes later, a tall black guy walks up to our front desk asking how to get to the patient in question's room. Okay, I am a nurse, but this story isn't about a birth I witnessed, it was my own birth. And although my mother definitely didn't cheat, all the midwives were convinced she had. For background, my mother's white and got married young to another white guy. Actually forced to by my grandparents who were horrified since she was living in sin. Their relationship petered out and they separated, but remained very good friends. Then she met my father, a black man, and began a relationship with him. Mum was still married at the time. Neither her nor her husband were in a hurry to get divorced, and he became good friends with Mum's new partner, my dad. Mum got pregnant with me. Time moves along. She goes into labor and needs to head to the hospital. Dad was working and couldn't make it home in time to get her there. So, still being good friends with the husband, she rings him and he comes around to drive her to the hospital and decides to hang out until I'm born. After an hour or so, Dad arrives. He was freaking out a bit, so his best friend, who was another black guy, drove him because Dad didn't trust himself. They arrive at the hospital right as Mom is ready to deliver. The midwives come out to the waiting room and grab the husband to be there when the baby's born. They knew that my mom's technical husband had driven her there, so assumed that he was the father of the baby. Went and grabbed him and tried to drag him into the delivery room. He freaked out and yelled, No, I'm not the father, I'm just the husband. The father's Aboriginal." Dad and his friend pulled up into the car park as this is happening, and Dad leaps out of the car. decides he needs to have a quick smoke to settle his nerves before coming in. His friend doesn't smoke, so he walks in ahead. Just then, the midwives come running back to the waiting room to grab the actual father and see the only black guy in there. Obviously him, right? So they take him and suit him up to bring him to delivery. For whatever reason, my dad's friend chose not to question this and just went along with it. The midwives reach the delivery room and shove him inside. Mom, legs in stirrups and at the pushing stage, goes absolutely ballistic. "Not that black guy, he's not the father, go get the other one." The midwives hustle my dad's friend out and return him to the waiting room to wait with the husband. My dad has finally come inside by now, and the midwives marched up to him and said something like, "I hope you're the father this time, otherwise I'm just going to give up and she can give birth alone." So that's the story about how the hospital went through 3 different men before they actually found my father. Consulted a couple who were expecting a baby and were confused about how she had chlamydia. Again, turns out they both had chlamydia. Both got treated and continued doing their thing. She could not get her head around how she had it again if he was the only guy she had slept with. He just looked very sheepish as I tried to subtly explain maybe he had caught it from elsewhere and passed it on. Took a long time for the penny to drop. One of those couples where you realize the kid won't get any help with their science homework from their parents. I know a guy who's fully white. His parents are both white and his younger sister's black. I always assumed she was adopted, and one day I mentioned it. He looked at me weirdly and was like, "No dude, that's my full-blood sister." Obviously, I didn't believe it, and neither did his dad at the birth. But they got the paternity test and she was his daughter. Likelihood is they've got some black ancestors far enough back to be forgotten about. I also know a dude who has a white Scottish mom and a black Jamaican dad. Dude came out pale white with a ginger afro. Genetics were not on his side. Anesthesiologist here. C-sections are typically done under spinal anesthesia, and we're the ones at the head of the table keeping the mother calm and talking her through the procedure while the surgeons operate. I've seen it more than once, but I remember one in particular where the parents were both very Caucasian and the baby was very much not. The father obviously had to be very dark-skinned. At delivery, when the not father saw the baby, he just looked down at his wife, who started to cry and calmly called her some horrible names and walked out. She started screaming for him to come back, but there wasn't much she could do since she was, still being operated on. She lost it to the point I eventually had to sedate her just a bit because she was in danger of injuring herself. As far as I know, her husband never came back to the hospital. I don't know what happened after that. A friend of mine tells the story of his aunt giving birth in the 70s or 80s to a baby that at first glance appeared to be of Asian descent. Aunt and her husband are both Caucasian Midwesterners from long lines of the same sort, going back to Germany. There was evidently a shocked moment, and then the aunt's father, my friend's grandfather, quipped, "Well, they say 1 in 7 babies is born Chinese." And everyone laughed. The tension broke, long enough for the doctor, also a white Midwesterner of German stock, said that likely the kid's color is just off due to the events of the birth. The baby is now a man in his 30s or 40s and looks like your typical Midwesterner. He just had some tinge to his skin for a few hours following the birth, plus some dark hair at birth that has since lightened up. I had a case where the newborn had chlamydia. Got it from the mom, obviously. So the mom admits that she was cheating on the dad, because there's no way to explain that one. Except the dad was cheating too, with the other guy's girlfriend. And all 4 of them had chlamydia and no idea who had it first. They also had no idea who the actual dad was. That was a rodeo. My brother had a surprise baby this way. He and a coworker had a one-night stand while she was broken up with her ex. She gets back with her ex, ends up pregnant. Flash forward to the delivery day. The day my brother sends me a picture of a random baby out of the blue and says, "I think I'm a dad." She's white, her boyfriend is black, my brother is white. Baby came out looking very, very white. I don't know how it went down in the hospital room, but I know they separated very soon after. My brother went to visit her in the hospital and asked if she would let him take a paternity test. She agreed and it came back positive a week later. And that's how I got my surprise nephew. I'm of Irish descent, extremely pale, freckled, wavy dark hair, and darker green eyes. My husband is half Native American, half German, dark hair, and slightly wavy as well. My daughter came out with light brown curly hair and ever so slight strawberry blonde pieces mixed throughout. Curls for days. And the nurse goes, "Wow, where did you get that hair?" Knowing I had similar color as a baby and my mother has kinky curly hair, my husband in a room full of nurses goes, "I don't know, poster, where did she get that hair?" I could have killed him. Not a nurse, but my wife is, and I hear everything. A woman was delivering her white ex-husband's baby with her new black boyfriend beside her, and after the baby came out and had his foot stamped with the ink pad, the boyfriend pointed to the black foot and said, "Aw, he's got my feet." I guess it's off topic, but I laughed when she told me. My brother married a half Korean, half white woman who had 3 girls to the same Mexican guy. The first looks Latina. The second looks Pacific Islander. The third girl has platinum blonde hair and icy blue eyes. They look nothing alike, and yet if you look at their lineage, it all makes sense. I don't know if this ever caused any issues between her and her ex, but I could understand if an eyebrow was raised in the third one. Now she is a 4th girl with my brother, and she looks nothing like the other 3. Just standard brown hair, brown-eyed white girl. Not a delivery nurse, but I have to share. My friend Sarah was pregnant and her boyfriend flaked out and was not in the picture. So her other friend Eric and I took it upon ourselves to be there for her during the pregnancy. When she was having an ultrasound, we were both there in the room with her. As the tech is showing us the baby's face, we're saying things like, "Dude, that's totally your nose. Look, that can't be my chin," and things like that. Sarah was laughing and the bewildered tech was looking at the 3 of us, probably making comparisons herself. I ended up working with that tech years later. One day she said, "So, out of curiosity, who was the father?" I'm a nurse. I've seen quite a few situations where dad turns out not to be dad, but never because of the color of the newborn. I have, however, seen an absolute ton of kids who are born and don't look like the same ethnicity as their parents for days, or sometimes a couple weeks. Babies often look darker when they're born. Just saying, some of these anecdotal stories might not necessarily be true. I had a female patient come in with abdominal pain. Pregnancy test was positive. She was with her husband, who evidently had a vasectomy about a year prior. I slowly backed out of the room after that one. I know it's possible, just improbable. Obligatory, not a doctor or nurse, but both my parents have blonde hair, and when I was born, my hair was strawberry blonde. My paternal grandparents lost their heads and accused my mom of cheating because red-tinted hair didn't run in their family. However, it ran in my mom's family with a redhead popping up every now and then. My paternal grandparents didn't know that. They just really hated my mom, so looked for excuses to drag her down. It wasn't until I stopped looking like a potato, as most newborns do, and started looking like a person when my dad's family features came through enough to make them apologize to my mom. A friend of mine, white guy, never knew who his father was, got married and had a kid with a white girl. Kid came out black, so he opted for a paternity test rather than walking away, and it was indeed his son. So he took a genetics test a couple years later and it turns out he's half African. Had a patient come into the ER for a UTI with her boyfriend of 3 months. His words. She was 19, acting extremely dramatic for just having a UTI. We tell her we need urine. She urges us to cath her, which is really unusual, but says she can't pee. So me and another nurse assume the position to put in a catheter with her lying on the gurney. At this point, the nurse screams, "Call L&D, she's crowning!" L&D nurse gets in just in time to grab the child as it shoots out into her hands and is a living, breathing baby. The girl swears she had no idea she was pregnant. They wheel her off to postpartum and the guy is just kind of left standing there, dumbstruck. "We've only been dating for 4 months. I had no idea she was pregnant. She never mentioned it at all." All with his head just buried in his knees while he was sitting on the floor against the hallway wall. I felt so bad for the guy. Okay, so story from a friend of my brother's. She worked as a nurse and a woman and her husband came in. They were both white, and she's delivering a child that was black. The husband immediately starts saying WTF, while she's going on and on about dormant traits and everything. He orders a DNA test. While this is going on, her mother and stepdad show up. The stepdad is black. After the testing is done, the DNA test ends up showing that the baby is the stepdad's. Her husband instantly dropped her and cut ties. It's sometimes best not to leap to conclusions too quickly. When I was born, my skin was a little blue. Thankfully, my dad didn't get angry and accuse my mom of screwing around with a Smurf. Not a doctor or nurse, but in undergrad I had a buddy, Caucasian, who'd been dating the same girl, also Caucasian, for quite a while. She gets pregnant and he proposes. Fast forward a few months and both families are eagerly waiting at the hospital to greet the baby. The baby comes out black. Everyone's in shock. Girls frantically trying to convince everyone that there's been a misunderstanding. My buddy calls off the engagement immediately, returned the ring, and never looked back. Not a doctor or nurse, but when I was 14, maybe 15, I found out my cousin and his wife were having a baby. Keep in mind, my mom had lots of much older siblings, so my cousin was already 23 at this point. Fast forward 8 months later, me, mom, and the rest of our extended family are eagerly waiting outside the delivery room, and we hear a scream. Not my cousin's wife, but my cousin. The nurse opens the door for us, and we see my cousin sitting on a chair, his head in his hands. His wife is holding their baby in her hands, but the only thing was, the baby was black. Needless to say, they divorced a month later, and we've not heard from her since. Med student here. Had a mother who was A negative and a father who was A negative, but baby ended up being A positive. Mother was asking if it was possible for this to happen, and the doctor kind of implied that it was possible, to my surprise, since it's not meant to be. But they suggested to retest the husband's blood group and to follow up with their general practitioner. The doctor told me after that they didn't want to get involved, and would leave it up to the general practitioner to deal with and just hope the husband was actually positive. Apparently things got awkward the next day. They stayed for a couple of days after due to complications, when the husband was asking about blood grouping and was just strongly suggested to get retested. I never found out what happened after, but from my impression of the mother and some of the things she said, I'm pretty sure she cheated. My wife's best friend is a doctor who delivers babies, so I have a couple of stories for you. She delivered one baby where the father and mother were acting really awkward, but he was around during labor, and when it came time to push, the man just walked out and left the room. Apparently, the issue was they were just friends, and he lived in another state with his wife and kids. Another woman had an affair with her cousin's husband and got pregnant, calling him her fiancé. Her husband died during this period, and it prompted her to go out and sleep with a few other one-night stands. At this point, she was exploring other alternatives, but was turned away because she was overweight and hypertensive, making the procedure too risky. She never followed up with the doctor and gained weight to over 400 pounds. It was too late for any other options at this point, and she'd been taking medication for the hypertensive thing, and the medication can cause death or deformities. When she delivered, it took the entire staff to prevent her from having a stroke. And the baby's kidneys, do they work? No one knows. Most of the stories are that the man cheated. If the mother cheats, there's no real reason to bring it up, so they don't really know. Lots of telling a mother who has only slept with one man that she and her baby have chlamydia. No weird stories of white babies to black parents or vice versa. I had a friend who was a nurse tell me this story. A birth of a couple's third child. The couple was white. The baby was obviously of Pacific Islander descent. Everyone went very quiet. The nurse telling me the story said she took a moment of silence as she realized what had happened. Then she tried to act normally, but waiting for the outburst. She said the tension was unreal. The guy stared for a minute at the child that was obviously not his. The mom was already in tears and talking very fast. The guy stood up, looked around for a minute, then left the room. Never said a word. He wasn't seen again at the hospital. The mom spent the rest of the day on her phone. The nurse doesn't think she ever found him. I got a weird one. My previous neighbor was a nurse and delivered one where my buddy of mine was involved. A buddy of mine she knew came in with his girlfriend who was in labor. My buddy was clearly not keen on having a kid, but the mother wanted to go through with it and was madly in love with my buddy to a point that it was obsession. So the girlfriend decided to keep it in order to keep him around. The girlfriend was properly paranoid, delusional, and an abusive head case that made my buddy's life hell for 18 months. He was at the point where I genuinely thought he might just run away or slip into depression because of this woman. She insisted it was his and was expecting him to either marry her or, in her words to one of my mutual friends, "If he won't love me, I'll just take him for all his money for the next 18 years. My neighbor said he looked like death in the waiting room while the baby was being delivered. The baby comes out, my buddy and the girl, who are both English-Irish heritage, looked and saw a Pacific Islander baby. Turns out the girlfriend was sleeping with one of the local rugby players on the down low, and he ended up knocking her up. My neighbor said she had never seen someone who looked so emotionally and mentally broken do such a 180 in less than a minute. My neighbor looked back at him as he walked out of the room laughing maniacally with joy. He looked at my neighbor and said, "That's not mine. Thank heck, I'm free." She said he was spotted dancing down the hallway to the exit. My buddy's doing okay now. He has a very nice South African girlfriend who he's been with for 3 years. They're looking to buy a house together and get married soon. His ex is now living with her parents in a small granny shack with the kid. The Pacific Islander baby daddy went MIA, and last I heard is suspected to be hiding out on some island in his native Fiji. Can't blame the guy for leaving, and I personally hope he's never found. Hospital social worker here. I met with a family because their baby was in the ICU for inhaling his monicum during birth, and we met with all NICU families for support. The father asked me in front of their 5 other children who were old enough to understand the question, how to get a paternity test. Awkward. I don't know about the delivery part necessarily, but the birth certificate part can be awkward. In Louisiana, if you're married or have been divorced for less than 300 days, the husband/ex-husband goes on the birth certificate unless there's a DNA test proving who the father is with a form signed by the mother, the husband, and the actual father. Many divorced women don't realize that and have a baby with someone else. It's a shock to find out legally, your ex-husband is still the baby's father unless you get all that other stuff sorted. Midwife from Australia here. Craziest delivery I ever attended was a girl who was pregnant 17 times with 15 live children as a result of those pregnancies. And 3 different dads turned up over the short course of her labor with baby number 15. They proceeded to have a fist fight about who was the real father, and I had to call security to escort them out. That followed with a call to child services. My wife is a nurse. One day, she had a woman come in complaining of abdominal pain. They quickly find out she's pregnant and in labor. Her wife arrives shortly after with a lot of questions. This is my granddad's story. He was a gyno. It must have been in the 70s when a married white couple came into the hospital with a woman in labor. Baby's born, my granddad is called to cut the cord. But the baby's all gray. The nurse is in terror and holds the baby upside down and smacks it on the butt, as was custom to clear the airways, and is almost in tears. Doctor, the baby's only getting darker and darker. I don't think it's getting enough oxygen. My granddad, having worked in the field for a long time at that point, just started smiling, took the baby and said, I think a good bath will do just fine, and proceeded to wash all the blood and fluids from birth off the baby, revealing a healthy and half-black child. He used to tell that story all the time when I was a kid. He said the husband just stormed out and it was a huge scandal in their village. Since it was Germany in the 70s in a rural area, there weren't that many candidates for the father either. Well, somehow, I don't know why, the husbands are almost always first aggressive towards the doctor or nurse who presents the baby. Had a case I'll always remember. My first shift in gynecology. Late night, around 11 p.m. A woman comes in, screaming and cursing like there's no tomorrow. We check her and she's around 7 centimeters dilated. At 10, you can start the birth. We rush her to the birth room. Father's being led into the waiting room, which is also a library for new fathers. A lot of books with information on firstborns and things like that. Fast forward. Woman gives birth, she goes to the recuperating room, husband goes to her, both eagerly awaiting for the baby to be presented. My boss, who's one sadistic guy, hands me the baby and tells me to go present it. Did I forget to mention that the baby was black? Oh, and the mother was a snow white skinned redhead, and the father, well, blue eyes and blonde hair. There was absolutely no way that I could justify that amount of meddling. I bite the bullet, take the little lad, and head off. I enter the room. The father's standing up. He sees that the baby is black. He looks at his wife, looks at the baby, looks at my face. My face tells him, yes, there's no mistake here. And he loses it. Weirdly enough, his anger is not focused on the wife, but on me and the baby, the 2 unlucky bastards who had nothing to do with the betrayal or any of that. The husband starts throwing newspapers and books at me and the baby, shouting, "Get him away, that's a mistake." Not in a racist way or anything, just the man was in shock, and kept backing up towards the wall like a cornered animal trying to run away from a predator. In this case, he was just cornered by a dreadful fact, the one that he's not the father. Me and the baby managed to escape with just a bruise on my forehead. Bibles travel faster than any other books through air.
What are some common forms of sexism that men face? I was a single dad for 20 years. There are a lot of places that still reflect parenting being dominated by mothers. From mom's talk mornings at my son's school to being told that Coworker.com didn't want me because I was a dad. And then there were the assumptions that I didn't have custody. Some by state officials, with me repeatedly needing to explain that he was in my care 28 days of the month. I'm certain if the situations were reversed, I would have been ordered to pay more than $60 a week for child support. Heck, if I was in California, I might have had to end up paying her child support even as our son lived with me 28 days of the month. I could probably give examples all day. I do excuse most individuals' behaviors as they are making assumptions based upon what's true 90% of the time. The systemic stuff needs to change though. Women and men are no longer in the same place in society as they were when these laws were written. As someone whose father is a nasty piece of work who also didn't pay child support, I have to agree with this. As they said, men and women are not in the same places that they were like when these laws were written, societally, at least not in the West. Thus, I don't think it's controversial to say that more cases need to be judged on an individual level by who is in the wrong and who has done what, no matter what their gender or anything is. The double standard. I remember watching a clip from The View, I think. I don't remember too many of the specifics, but the topic of conversation was that a woman who had become fed up with her husband and his actions had proceeded to cut his penis off in the middle of the night and threw it into the trash compactor, or something like that. Again, details are fuzzy. One of the ladies, might have been Sharon Osbourne, talked about how hell hath no fury or he shouldn't have been messing around, and the crowd went wild. Most of the women in the audience and on the panel were clapping and whooping it up. Then one lone female member of the panel, I wish I could remember who it was, it took quality courage, spoke up and said that them all laughing about this wasn't right. In fact, it was quite wrong. She pointed out how differently the panel and audience would have reacted if the situation had been a man who had cut his wife's breasts off and thrown it in the dishwasher, regardless of what actions they were upset with or felt grieved. The idea of mutilating your spouse shouldn't be met with laughter and applause. From what I remember, some of the other ladies on the panel tried to say, that's different, and others rolled their eyes or became uncomfortable. I remember thinking what courage it must have taken to call out the double standard right then and there. On television, with the studio audience clearly already on the side of the original joke, it shouldn't matter what your gender is. Call out double standards when confronted with them. Apparently, the show was The Talk, not The View, and the woman who had the courage to speak up was Sarah Gilbert. Thank you. Let's be honest, it's not just a gender thing. The world is absolutely full of double standards in race, religion, and all kinds of things. Really, it's just a people thing where some people just cannot stand to be called out for their bad behavior, but are more than willing to just shout to the heavens how someone else has done wrong. My wife and I decided to hire a male nanny. This decision causes me, my wife, and the male nanny to experience a whole range of uncomfortable situations. Because we live in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people assume we're a polyamorous couple. We are not. Some people assume that me and the male nanny are a gay couple and my wife was our surrogate. On the first day of school, for example, my daughter's teacher introduced us as her daddies, even though she had met with my wife on multiple occasions beforehand. Others simply can't wrap their head around the fact that a man might want to work in childcare. I can't tell you how many warnings we've received, even from within our own families, that we have to watch him closely because it's not a natural thing for a man to want to work in childcare. He must be a pedophile. When it comes to raising children, men still face an enormous amount of sexism from all sides. This is incredibly true. Men who want to work in childcare are looked at very strangely because it is an odd thing why a man would want to be involved with a child that isn't their own. I mean, hell, there are some men out there who don't even want to be a part of their own child's life. So, I'll admit, I understand the skepticism. TLDR, domestic court system is biased against men start to finish. I was stalked by an ex. Everyone was like, you must have given it to her good, LOL. To top it off, I was treated like the criminal every time I called the cops. When I went to file for a restraining order, I had to ask 3 times because they kept referring me to a courtroom assuming I had been served. And the icing on top, the judge I finally got treated me like I was a whiny baby and gutted the restraining order. I'm still convinced the only reason I got it at all was that I had my family there for support.
I fear for any day that I'm in public with my niece and her parents are nearby. Little kids can become emotional and are too young to understand the ramifications of shouting something like, "You're not my dad," when they get told something they don't want to hear.
This is true. It's all too true. If a man sees a child that's lost potentially and it's like, oh damn, that kid needs someone to check up on them or whatever, you have to weigh it out in your head how appropriate or weird it might look for you as a man to approach a child. My husband and I have 2 daughters. One is his stepdaughter and I have joint custody. A few years ago, my friend paid for me to fly out to Seattle and stay a few days for her birthday. Our daughter was almost 2. My mom went into a panic. Who is going to watch the baby? Well, her completely capable and loving father is here. And I guess since he is a competent person with normal functioning cognitive abilities and, he's her father, I guess him? She does this anytime I do anything by myself. Where's the baby? Who is taking care of the baby? Her father, you goddamn shrew. Sorry, I ranted a little. Well, that sounds like a personal issue of the shrew. I mean, there is a typical thing in sitcoms and whatnot, especially family-orientated ones, where the father is usually an idiot with maybe every so often a smidgen of good advice or something, but for the most part, they're kind of an irresponsible jackass. So I just think at this point, it's a problem of the shrew ladies. TLDR, men are perceived to be disposable. Young men in every society are viewed as infinitely disposable. They are cannon fodder. Everyone craps themselves when female civilians are victims of a battle in war. No one gives two craps about the young male soldiers, most of which were either conscripts or forced into the military due to lack of opportunities. Civilians equal women and children. Read any of the recent articles about Aleppo. The headlines or text in the article always has this crap like, many of those killed were women and children, or 1 in 5 of the victims were women and children, and it's infuriating. Like, who do you think the other 4 to 5 victims were? Freaking trees? I googled Aleppo and went on to Google News, and this was the last result. I haven't read all of the articles, of course, but I'm sure a lot more specifically mention women and children and leave out men. Male disposability is real. How many victims of violence in video games, movies, TV shows, plays, books, etc. are male? Now tell me how many victims of violent crime, the homeless, army casualties, and members are male. Yet these things are barely talked about. What is one of the leading causes of homelessness? Divorce. What is the leading cause of divorce? The man losing his job. Which gender has a higher successful self-deletion rate? Men. 5-to-1 ratio. Which gender has a lower life expectancy? Men. -5 years. Which gender gets the majority of government funding and funding from charities for healthcare? Women. And I'm sure that everyone knows about the situation with divorce cases and family courts because people seem to at least be aware of the problem there because of organizations like Fathers for Justice. Then we get to the prevention of domestic violence against women and girls specifically. That's freaking dumb. Why not try to prevent it against everyone? Women, men, girls, and boys. Men are much less likely to seek aid for domestic violence, and there are barely any domestic abuse shelters for men, whereas there is a huge amount of shelters for women. My point with all of this isn't screw women, they have it good. It's that sexism against men isn't acknowledged because men are seen as disposable and it's society's and the government's fault. I'm glad this individual specified that this wasn't a screw women, they've had it too good for too long kind of thing, because Lord knows in very many places outside of the Western world, they've still got it pretty goddamn bad. Getting crap for being teachers because men plus kids equals he's a pedo. At least that's the one off the top of my head that makes me the angriest. My abusers were female. I started doing a lot better in school once I had male teachers around. I've always felt safer with men. Aw, look, Dad's babysitting today. Hell no. He's parenting like he's supposed to. Stop flapping your dentures, Grandma. Father stays home with kids while Mother works. She must have his nuts in a bag in the freezer. Or maybe he's just too dumb to get a decent job and his wife has to take care of all of them. Granted, I know one family where that's the case. He's too mentally ill to work in most environments. So she teaches and he stays home with their kids. But that's not the norm in the Mr. Mom situations I've seen. That is the first time I've ever heard of a Mr. Mom. Is that like, it's like a label? It's a situation, whatever. All I'm thinking is Mr. Men. I found out that I'm unattractive a few months ago. It felt pretty bad, to be honest. A coworker/friend of mine who I've been pals with for nearly 2 years, and I know her husband and I'm great pals with him, came to work very dressed up. Way more than normal, so being a friend and wanting her to know I noticed how great she looked, simply commented, "Wow, coworker, you look very nice. Going to a wedding or something?" She laughed it off, and that was that. Later on, I got a message from her. "Hey, about what you said, I've known you for a long time and I know you didn't mean anything weird by it, but that was kind of creepy. Don't say things like that. Just wanted you to know." I felt terrible. I didn't know how what I said was construed as creepy, but I apologized and let it go. When lunch rolled around and we were hanging out in the lunch area when another coworker walked by and said, "Wow, you look great. Got anything planned after work?" She blushed, thanked him, and then he left. I sat there waiting for her to say something like, "See, how weird," or something like that. Nope. So I brought it up. She said it wasn't really that creepy. So I pushed the issue and we talked about it. After a long discussion on why me saying it was creepy and him saying it wasn't, we came to 2 conclusions. It was either weird because she's known me for much longer and it was weird to be hit on by a close friend, while it wasn't weird for someone she only knew a bit. Or it was because he was handsome and I was not. Okay guys, let's rewind a bit. The first few "she's a C-word" responses were fine, but it seems like everyone thinks she's a total B for saying that. chat. I'll defend her because I don't think she was trying to be a butt about it. Both the text and the chat at lunch were very open, and I genuinely think she was looking out for me. She's married, and I'm great friends with both her and her husband. I still regularly hang out with them, and they both have bent over backwards to help me. So I'm not being used or being mistreated. I think there is a weird knee-jerk thought process that someone you don't find attractive flirting with you is creepy, while someone who is attractive is kind of empowering. But it goes both ways. If a 60-year-old lady who smoked since she was 8 told me that I looked great, I'd internally squirm if I thought she was hitting on me. Compliments are nice, but if we think we're being hit on by someone we don't find attractive, I think a lot of people think it's either gross, weird, or creepy, and that's unfair, but even I'm guilty of it. Guys, I've gotten like 20 plus responses and PMs telling me to get fit, wear better clothes, groom myself, etc., etc. Holy crap, guys, I appreciate the tips. I look fine, though. I found out I'm ugly was an exaggeration, a joke. Story is true, and the guy who was more attractive than I was more attractive than I, but I'm not Sloth from the Goonies. Geez, no, I don't want to buy your personal trainer service. Why would you even PM me that? Okay, so at first I found the whole, a few months ago I found out that I'm unattractive and it felt pretty bad, TBH. And that was funny. That was funny as hell to me. The part that it's the other day I found out I am ugly. I don't know why that tickles my ribs though for some reason, but the bit where it's if someone compliments me or flirts with me and I don't find them attractive, it's creepy and weird, everyone thinks it. No, I'm a man. I don't get compliments just all the time, really. If someone wants to compliment me, even if they are a chain-smoking 80-year-old woman who's been smoking since she was 8 and she's all well, aren't you a handsome young man? I will take that compliment and I will even flirt back a little bit. I mean, I literally did this to a Scientologist lady the other day that I was kind of trying to eke out a bit because they were trying to invite me to a goddamn music festival. Aren't you a handsome young man? Would you like to come to this music festival? They're gonna be chicks as lovely as you there, ma'am. I didn't go, of course, but wouldn't it be funny if I could have gone down that path and got married at the Church of Xenu 10 years down the freaking line? I'll begin by saying this actually happened to me. Anytime a woman claims any form of sexual harassment, the man is automatically guilty and forced to try to prove his innocence, because the company doesn't want a lawsuit. I literally had a female subordinate give me a hug because I let her off early to go to a family function. I came to work the next day and was immediately sent to the boss's boss's boss, where I was advised that I was being put on unpaid leave during a sexual harassment investigation. As it turns out, the entire thing was right under a camera, so you could clearly see her hug me. Even so, I was told that she said I told her to hug me before she got to leave, and then I got fired. Scum behavior, hate it. My knee-jerk reaction, although it's not a perfect answer, is that people who make accusations like this, especially more serious accusations that go to court, if it turns out that it's coming from a place of malice or personal gain and under false pretenses, I think the accusee should be held responsible, or maybe even to a higher standard of responsibility and punished as such if they are found to be lying. But again, that is not a perfect answer to these issues, because then you gotta consider the process in the jury, in the investigation and whatnot, and how things can go wrong and how actual victims can be left in a destitute situation. I know some of y'all hate it when I go a bit too long on the personal commentary, so I made it nice and short for you, but I'll be back. The employee bathrooms at my job have been scheduled for an update. The work on the men's room started a week or two ago Monday and ended this past Monday morning, during which time the men had to use the public customer bathroom and the women continued to use their employee bathroom. On Monday afternoon, when the work began on the women's room, the newly refurbished, as yet unused by a single man men's room became a temporary women's bathroom, until the work on the new women's bathroom is finished. So the men have to go several weeks without an employee bathroom, while the women never have to go a single day without one. Not exactly common, but it otherwise fits the question and is currently on my mind. Well, that is just legitimately unfair. I'd be scared that those mean old dirty girls will poop in the urinals before I get a chance to. I mean pee in the urinals, yeah. I'm a male nurse in the ER, and there are a lot of extra rules I have to follow that the females do not. If I'm doing any kind of perineal care, Foley, straight catch, pelvic, or even rectal temp, on a female patient, I need a female chaperone. However, a female nurse can go do those same procedures on a male without a male chaperone. The looks I get from many elderly patients when I tell them I'm their nurse, those judging eyes. I had a guy straight up laugh in my face and tell me my parents must be embarrassed by me. Mothers freak out when I'm the nurse for their child. I had a lady straight up tell me I couldn't help drain her daughter's armpit abscess because she thought I'd be eyeballing her. No. Literally none of this happens to the female staff members. And frankly, I am a much better nurse than quite a few of them. I think it's been pretty well established there are just jobs where men typically aren't very welcome, or if you are there, you have a lot more rules and regulations that you must follow because of people's discomfort around you. I've just recently noticed something that bugs me a bit. I grew a beard throughout October to December. My girlfriend and all the women on her side of the family were quick to offer their criticism. I didn't really care too much and took it lightly. But after a while, I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like if the tables were turned. Like if my GF started wearing a shirt she just bought and really loved, but my brother, dad, and myself criticized it every time she wore it. That would be messed up, and people would take her side immediately. Talk crap about my choice to grow a bit of facial hair, and no one bats an eye. I feel like this is kind of a straw man argument with the whole if my wife decided to wear a shirt that she loved and I criticized it, then everyone would side with her immediately. Not necessarily. If it's a crap shirt, it's a crap shirt. I don't freaking know, man. I grew a mustache last year for Halloween so I could do a Ron Swanson outfit. I got crap. I didn't give a single crap about what other people thought. Goddamn self-deletion. You want to raise awareness for self-deletion and mental illness? Yeah, fill your boots. But it gets on my frickin' tits when it's all directed towards the struggles women have regarding mental health and self-deletion ideation. And yet the male gender is chastised for anything regarding to ending it early or mental health. The notion of a man to be a strong and mentally powerful individual is a crock. It doesn't define a man. How he deals with it is how it defines him. True that. I'm a girl, so I don't know firsthand, so tell me if I'm wrong. I consider it sexist that boys have to be tough and play with Legos and all that crap, even if they want to play with dolls. If their favorite color is hot pink, then that's wrong as well. Growing up, they are not allowed to be emotional, to cry, or to need someone to help them. They can't look for comfort because they have to be manly. Also, in many places in the world and social environments, they are expected to pay for a girl's food, drink, whatever. For her birthday, you should give them something expensive. For what it's worth, it does not happen where I live, and in my circle of friends, mostly educated middle-class people, but I can see it all the time. It made sense when women were not working, but now you don't know whether the woman actually makes more in her job than her date, but he's still expected to pay. I don't know about everyone else, maybe I'm just lucky. I mean, there have been times where I've just paid without saying anything, but, you know, I've gone on dates with some pretty considerate women who have offered to pay for their own food and everything. I don't doubt that there are women who can be kind of bratty or insistent that you pay for their meals and all the date and everything, but, you know, I certainly have not come across one like that yet. I was trying to be friendly to a woman during lunch at work. She was literally sat across from me. Mind you, we had been trained alongside one another. So I said hi and asked how she was. She told me that her boyfriend's grandpa died. She said that she got really close to his grandpa. I said that I was really sorry and did my best to empathize. I asked how long her and her boyfriend had been together. She said 4 years and I said congrats. She told me all about her kids and asked me questions about work. Mid-conversation, when she had done most of the talking, she picks up her phone, dials a number. It's her boyfriend, from the sound of it. She says, yeah, I was just calling because this guy was being way too friendly. I have no attraction to this person on a sexual level at all. I did not make passes at her, flirt, or anything. In fact, up until then, I had tried to keep it friendly but strictly professional, but she insisted on talking about her family, so I gladly lent an ear. We just had friendly exchanges up until then, and I thought that she wanted to be friends. Apparently, I was wrong. In that moment, I realized that I can't get a date to save my life, or even get a woman that I am attracted to maintain more than a minute or two of conversation with me before writing me off. And yet I give this woman that I have no interest in the impression that I'm being too friendly when she gave me every reason to believe that she wanted a friend to talk to. F my life. This can go both ways, but yeah, I know some women who are a bit too egotistical for their own good and just kind of assume that anyone approaching them is immediately attracted to or wooed by them in some way. The same thing does happen for guys, but it's usually in a way where it's like, wait, is this girl interested in me? She's like asking me about my hobbies and stuff like that? What's going on here? There's no perfect way to remedy this at this point, it's just a societal norm at this stage, but whatever.
This is for Gen Z and millennials. How hard is it for you to buy a home? The only way I can afford a home at this point is if I buy raw land, harvest and process the trees on it, and build it myself. This is a dream for some people, but in the UK, land is expensive, and we have to buy/import most of our wood because wood foraging is illegal without a license, because of course it is. I can afford the month-to-month mortgage. I cannot, however, afford a down payment. My parents' house's mortgage is like half of the rent in my area. I can afford that, and probably most of the utilities and such by myself. That being said, the price of the house has almost tripled in value since they bought it. I could probably swing the down payment by myself, but it would definitely make me uncomfortable. I honestly feel like I need to get married just to get a house. Here's a detailed example. Wife and I bought our house in 1998 when our first child was born. The house sold for $105,000 and we put $10,000 down. We hadn't done anything major to the home and we cleaned it up in 2007 to secure a refinance to a lower interest rate and get cash to top off a remodel. Appraisal was $180,000. That's value growth fueled fully by the loss of so many independent home builders after the market crash. We brought the kitchen and bathrooms up to modern standards, stone countertops, new cabinets and fixtures, refurbished the wooden floors, added a door off the dining room and a large deck. We got the house appraised in 2021 for $290,000. 2 houses on our street sold for over $300,000 last year, and one of them was in rough shape. Banks here are requiring 30% down for new buyers right now. For my oldest son that is 2 years out of college, he would have to provide a down payment that is nearly as much as we bought the house for 25 years ago. For a 1,000 square foot home. Let that sink in. A lot of small construction company owners, the kind that would build small homes, went out of business or retired after the housing crash, and the industry hasn't recovered. This has caused a greater impact to those needing starter homes. Lower supplies means higher prices. On top of that, renting homes is a good source of passive income, so an industry of corporations built specifically to make money off of them and has grown like fungus on a rotting log in this nation. Home values are ridiculous, down payments are ridiculous, and corporate cash offers are desirable for sellers, making the first housing purchase a nightmare for many. Man, I relate to both of these comments so much. I honestly do feel like if I'm ever going to buy a house, I'm going to need a partner to do it. On top of that, I also hate the idea of renting. I understand why people do it, but I've never liked the idea of putting money into something that I will never own. So seeing the crazy amount of money you need for a down payment is soul crushing. Millennial here. All I had to do was marry a girl, buy her a car, help her get her license back, and turn her loose on the streets to get T-boned by a DoorDash driver. That DoorDash insurance payout was $1 million. Profit. Disclaimer, as of last week, I don't live in that house anymore, but that's another story. Wow, this story was basically I made my money the old-fashioned way. I got hit by a Lexus. I prefer a realistic dream, like going to Narnia through my closet. Just be grateful that you have a closet. I'm an old millennial in a nowhere state. Buying our home was insanely easy. They were giving them away. 2 months later, the national housing market began to crash. This was in 2007. We're still here with 13 years to go. I think if we were 25 today, starting over, it would be extremely tough. Kind of the same deal for me. Bought my first in 2009 when the market as a whole was its worst and at the worst time of year for sales to begin with. January closing at the end of February. I did some work to the place and stayed there to 2005 and sold it to make a little profit. The market was probably fair at this point, as it wasn't a buyer's market, but it wasn't a seller's market either. Then bought the house that I'm currently in, and since 2019, watched it double in value. Refinanced in 2021 at an extremely low rate. I honestly couldn't rent a decent apartment in my area right now for what my full payment is, taxes and insurance included. Plus all utilities cost me a month, and to own a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a yard and 2-car garage, it's messed up to think about it, but it will be paid off when I'm in my 40s to boot. But I literally can't afford to move at this point. It's sad that people who actually have houses right now can't even leave those houses if they wanted to because the market is so bad. Old millennial here. The only reason I own a house is because my mom and I went in together on a duplex. We decided that this financially made the most sense. She's getting older, so this way I can keep an eye on her too. I did the same thing with my mom back in 2010. We both have health issues that make it a good idea to have another grown-up in the house. Neither of us have a partner. It just made sense to stick together than sit miserably in each of our own tiny apartments. House is 2 floors, top floor is mine, bottom floor is hers, though we usually sit around in the downstairs living room where the computers are set up. It's crazy how many people have assumptions about people still living with their parents at a certain age, but I feel like if you have a family that you actually like, it might be the best option for some right now. I'm early career, just started really. I make $60,000 a year in Canada. I will never be able to afford a house in my lifetime just on this wage, or any wage that I'm likely to see in this field. My only chance is any inheritance I get, or shifting careers like I'm trying to do right now. It's awful and much harder than it should be, but in Edmonton you can find a decent house for about $160,000 to $190,000, which would be about $1,300 to $1,500 per month, including insurance and property tax. That's at 7.5% if you can make a 10% down payment. I know Edmonton is more affordable than other cities, but it's the only market I'm familiar with, and I think Calgary is about 5% more expensive. Just for informational purposes, I have no doubt many Canadian cities are out of reach for most everyone. In the Comox Valley, BC, where there is absolutely nothing but a dumb mountain and an army base, an old trailer in a park is now $270,000 plus. There's flippers everywhere, constantly building, and everything keeps getting more expensive here. It's hell. They don't realize that they've made it so that their kids will never be able to move out. Rooms in houses that morons who, for some reason apparently, thought housing was going to be banned or something, paid too much for their houses. Now they try to rent out single rooms here for more than a freaking Vancouver apartment, and they whine that they have to charge that because it has to be someone else's fault you bought something you can't afford. There are homeless people everywhere here. Wanna guess why? A trailer being over $270,000 sounds insane to me. It was super hard saving up. We aimed to buy a cheap place first and just get onto the ladder. At least that way we were building equity as opposed to paying rent. Average home is almost 7 figures and interest rates are approaching 8% in Canada. Unless you have a dual 6-figure income or live at home with a strong income, the odds of you affording a home near a job center is non-existent. Down payment has to be 20% for anything over $9,999. The cost of buying a home, interest and purchase price, is going up way faster than anyone can grow their actual income. We bought one in 2014 with an FHA loan. Only out-of-pocket cost was $500 for due diligence and around $2,000 for the lawyer. We've refinanced a few times and our mortgage will be about just under $1,300 later this year, when our taxes go up. Still cheaper than a 1-bedroom in a place where we won't get murdered. Not getting murdered is a huge selling point when I look for a home. I can't even rent a home. Same. I feel like I'm never going to be able to move past renting a room in a shared house. Elder millennial here. I bought in 2018. Had no cash in hand. Utilized a program from a lender for low/moderate income buyers. Not me. Or those buying in low/moderate income zones. That's me. Required only 5% down. Took a 401k loan for the down payment and closing costs. $160,000 Philly townhome. Mortgage payment even with MPI is less than the rent on my previous 2-bedroom apartment in the same neighborhood. Process was easy, but then again, I'm familiar with it working in banking for 15 plus years. I'd wager the biggest struggle of most millennials and Gen Z is the cash down for payment and closing. To that end, ask for low down payment programs from your lender and hope to God you have some of those money bag boomer relatives that can gift you some cash. Borrowed from my 401k and paid my down payment and closing about 10 years ago. At the time, my monthly was the same as rent I was paying. Today, it's much less. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. However, the 401k loan was really straightforward, and I had a good mortgage broker that helped me understanding a lot of the numbers. I had a younger millennial friend that did a first-time buyer home loan, and that seemed to work for them. I don't really like the idea of paying mortgage insurance, but they didn't have access to a loan. I got lucky with the market timing and had decent credit, and had good work history. I imagine it's a bit crazier/harder right now for people trying for the first time given the validity over the past few years. We kinda lucked into ours. We applied for a rural development loan through the USDA and qualified for $179,900 with a really good interest rate. We had to wait 6 months for it to process and couldn't find the right home in our budget. Then we stumbled upon a home that checked all of our boxes and was owned by a little old lady that just wanted to get it off her hands. Listed at $180,000, a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath on a 1/4 acre. Last I checked, it was estimated to be worth $430,000. Man, I hope one day that I'm in a position just to want to get a house off my hands. I often think I will never buy a home, and if I ever do, it won't be until I'm in my 40s or 50s. From UK here, born in 92, have a family, 2 kids, and a wife. Buying a house seems near impossible with your average income, current money outgoing on rent/living, kills any ability to save enough to get a down payment on the mortgage. I've come to accept that I'm 100% not buying a house anytime soon. It's not how it used to be, as my old man would say. Life is a struggle. I always thought life was a highway. An apartment alone these days costs you no less than $1,800 a month. It's extremely difficult. Older millennial, 1983, my mom gave me a little money to make a down payment on a 430 square foot condo in SoCal for $270,000 with PMI. Her thinking was that the market was only going to go up. Of course, 2008 happened. The bottom fell out of the market and I got laid off. Somehow I managed to hold on, and after 10 years, finally had enough equity to make a little off the place. My wife and I used it to buy a much more comfortable place in PNW 5 years ago. There were some tough times for sure, but I'm lucky compared to a lot of people. We refinanced in 2020 for a super low rate. I don't know how anyone can afford a mortgage with today's rates. We've been in our house for 5.5 years. An FHA loan and 2 down payment assistance programs through the city got us into it for almost nothing out of pocket. I don't recall the exact numbers now, but we had to put down earnest money, pay inspection, and like $250 at closing. It was under $1,000 when it was all said and done. The problem was finding a house we could afford. We got lucky there, because my best friend has a friend who at the time was working for the city. After $1 million worth of grants to a developer, all he had to do was sell one home to a low-income family. My best friend had to make sure all his contacts knew what we were trying to do. So his best friend referred us and they sold us the house for what we could afford. It was just dumb luck, in other words. The house is still in the ghetto, but all the other houses we could afford weren't just in the worst parts of the city, but also falling down. Like for real. One of the houses we looked at was basically missing a floor in one of the rooms. So we consider it a win. I just bought a home. I needed a $50,000 down payment to do it. I won't go into details on how I got that $50,000, but I can damn sure guarantee the average millennial/Gen Z don't have $50K to drop. I'm in the process of buying a luxury cardboard box. Should only take me 45 years to pay it down, but then the sucker's all mine. It's genuinely not a realistic goal for some people who are making an average wage and not married or receive a down payment from a family member. It's genuinely hopeless for now, and I'm glad I'm not in the hunt. Just gotta hold out until all the boomers die off. After that, hopefully I can squeeze in somewhere. Boomers dying off isn't going to help if all their homes are swooped up by investors to turn into Airbnbs. Legislation needs to be passed to limit the amount of investment into residential properties for anything to change. This comment right here, I honestly do believe, in America at least, that laws need to be made to limit people from buying up all the property. I believe I read an article about my state that over 50% of homes bought in the last few years were from major companies to be turned into rental properties or Airbnbs. It's pretty disgusting. We bought a house priced just over $100,000 with an FHA loan. Granted, this was back in 2015 when much lower priced homes were easier to find. The total down payment was just under $4K. There were other costs as well, but probably more than $2K from what I remember. We absolutely would not be able to afford the 15 to 20% down payment at that time. No way. We had a little bit of money saved and some money gifted to us when we got married. The house was crappy, but we slowly made improvements over the years. It did end up paying off beyond our wildest dreams when we sold it in 2021 in the super crazy market, and we were able to upgrade substantially. 25-year-old here. Me and my girl live in SoCal where the prices are crazy. It might be another 3 to 5 years until we're able to buy. It's crazy that you guys actually have a trajectory at all. I'm a California native, and the housing's been unbelievable since before the whole nation got its crisis wake-up call over a year ago. I have a few friends that are native to LA and a few that moved there and left. They all say the same thing. It's expensive. My partner and I both make over 6 figures. We live in Seattle, Washington, and we had to look outside the county we both work in to find somewhere we could afford. Got 5% down payment by using our life savings and borrowing from the 401k. I still feel lucky to be an owner with a relatively good loan rate, but it sickens me to think how hard it must be for most, when for us, as a privileged couple, it felt like a risky stretch to get into a $500,000K starter home. 3-bed, 1-bath, built in 1962, with no improvements. Seattle is crazy because 10 years ago things were so cheap. People in tech only wanted to buy East Side or Seattle. Places like Renton and Baltimore were both considered poor or far. Now, these same places are 3x in price and are unaffordable, and even techies are looking farther and farther for affordable housing. I remember when old houses in Bellevue could have been had for $400,000 and Renton houses were like $200K. That was just about 10 years ago in 2013. Have you ever thought it would be cool to go to the moon and how technically it could happen, but you know in all reality you're never going to stand on the moon? It's similar to that. We bought our first house in 2016, and since then it's appreciated $200,000. If we didn't buy when we did, we would still be able to buy, but not nearly the size house we can afford today. Since my wife and I bought in 2012, our house has increased the value by 245%. The appreciation value is great, but I have no idea who could afford a house right now. My wife, 40 female, and I, 38 male, bought our first home last year. It took 20 years together of building credit, building careers, saving cash, and then borrowing $5K to round out our down payment. Oh, and we moved from Central Texas to rural Eastern New Mexico. Our new property is awesome though. We're thrilled. That is insane that you would have to up and leave your own state to obtain homeownership. What is even crazier is that they had to leave Texas. It only felt like a few years ago that Texas was affordable. I moved back with my grandparents, just started my career and work remote on $30K a year and should have a down payment relatively soon for anything less than $130K. I live in the Midwest and I'm looking for smaller houses that don't cost an average of $500,000. My wife and I bought our house in 2016. We live in the South and it is a 3-bedroom home for under $200K. So I know the likelihood of something like that nowadays is crazy. It wasn't too bad, saved for a year or so, and since we were first-time home buyers, there were lots of programs I qualified for that saved us money in the closing costs. The hardest part was we were moving states and didn't have jobs locked in yet, but we were able to get it pushed through. What bank approved a mortgage for a couple with no jobs? That loan officer must have been off their meds that day. You got extremely lucky on that. Very young millennial / early Gen Zer here. I got a condo for $150K in a decent location. Average per capita income is $51,000, 3% poverty rate. For some general metrics, built in 2021, it was a lot of hunting, and the house is a 2-bedroom, but everything is spacious. It's by no means a beautiful house, but it's not run down either. Down payment wasn't too bad for me. There was ways to incorporate it into the loan. I forgot what that phrase was though. I would need a bank clerk to mistakenly add at least 2, ideally 3, zeros to the end of my account total and never notice. Like ever. I tried the loan route and it wasn't impossible with what little I had. That's what the bank told me anyways. I had planned on buying a shell of a home from the Amish and building the rest myself on my parents' land, but an opportunity plopped into my lap a year ago. My house was built in the mid-late 1800s and has been abandoned for 8 to 10 years before I got there. The previous tenant was nearly 100 and couldn't make it upstairs anymore and went into assisted living. Her children are in their 70s and didn't feel like doing anything with it, so the town obtained ownership of it. It ended up selling for $20,000, and the taxes last year was like $280 for the house and an acre or so of land. I'm slowly repairing / rebuilding things every couple of months with whatever money I have saved up. I've fixed the plumbing, electrical, roof, and several other issues that have been taken care of since I started. The spring project is the root cellar and rebuilding the cellar door along with some gardening prep. I like my process, but it certainly wouldn't be for everyone. It was full of rodents, ticks, used substances, and looting debris before I got there. Luckily, the bones were in good shape besides a few things I had to replace. 3 or 4 full roll-off dumpster containers later, and it's starting to make the situation not as worse every single day. In popular areas, impossible. In the Midwest, it's not that bad. I can get a decent starter home in a decent city pretty cheap here. The only problem is, it's the Midwest. My wife and I may be able to afford a mortgage on the cheapest home we could find, but we have about $400 to $500 between the both of us right now and definitely don't have enough to make a down payment. We live paycheck to paycheck. Average houses where I live go for around $200K, so it's not completely unobtainable. I gave up on the idea of homeownership like 10 years ago. I bought a house a little over a year ago. I'm a 38-year-old millennial. My credit score was on the high side of average or the low side of good, 700-ish, which is a whole thing to get on its own, but I was lucky in a lot of ways. I was shopping for homes in the 100K range because I'm a cheapskate, but there wasn't any good ones anywhere I wanted to live, which included a lot of places, some of which were quite far apart. So I gave up and started looking for places to rent. Turns out places to rent are awfully expensive too, so I went back to the housing market with a higher budget. Found a nice 1920s craftsman style home that was on the market for about $165,000. Real estate agent told me to offer 10K above because the market is crazy, but I offered 5K over instead. Offer accepted, had them do the inspections, and the owners were super helpful in fixing the things the inspector cited. Went to the bank and they were real helpful until they weren't. They wouldn't accept my pay card from my work for down payment money because they just didn't vibe with that company. They wouldn't accept Credit Karma cards that I had my tax returns on. They wouldn't accept cash because maybe I was a bad evil drug dealer. My father is a family practice physician and he was able to front the money and I just ended up paying him, which I recognize to be a privilege hardly anyone has. Huge obstacle. Be forewarned, you might want to put your money in a nice boring bank well before you start buying, or the banks will invent some obstacles for you.
When have you seen the real world hit a spoiled brat? When the high school principal's daughter, who previously got away with all kinds of garbage behavior, vandalism, drinking, major bullying, got caught vandalizing a lecture hall in uni, she was unceremoniously dumped and banned. Parents whined for months on Facebook about their poor baby's unfair treatment and the fact that her applications to other unis were being denied. Spending $50 on food a day is not normal. College girl got cut off from her parents for drinking and not going to class and had to get a job. She put on Facebook about how she's gonna go hungry and needs money. People offered her food and to make her dinner. She said, "That's okay, I just need about $40 to get through the day. I don't like to grocery shop." If you're wondering how she went through that much a day, she always ate out at a restaurant and had Starbucks twice a day. Add in snacks and alcohol and there's $40 in one day. I was a school bus driver in the 70s, during height of court-ordered busing, so I ferried poor kids to the rich side of town, then rich kids the other way. Lots of entitled brats, but one stands out. Super entitled kid, constantly defying rules. Eventually I caught him with too many witnesses attempting to set a bus seat on fire with his lighter. School officials were called. Hearing with officials and rich dad, and he's banned from all buses for the rest of the semester. Dad offers to pay for the damage and quietly accepts the punishment. Then comes the surprise. Next morning when I arrive at 6 a.m. to clean my bus, regular task every morning, rich kid and dad are standing there. Dad introduces me to my new personal bus cleaner for the rest of the year. He brings the kid every morning and forces him to wash and clean the floors of my bus before taking him to school. By the end of the year, entitled kid is actually working hard and being friendly. We're getting along pretty well, and I help him out sometimes so he can get on to school. Kid turned out okay when all was said and done. Good move by dad. Back in engineering school, one of my classmates was the son of one of our professors. Now, this professor was a really nice dude. He paid attention to his students, his classes were fun, and he rarely failed anyone. His son, on the other hand, was a total jerk, rude and nasty, and would always brag about how his dad was a highly senior professor with tenure. "You know who my dad is, right?" was literally his catchphrase. He wasn't even a good student. We ranked GPAs out of 10, and he was a 4. This professor actually taught a very specialized course, so we only had about 2 courses from him in our entire time at the school. This course in our 5th semester was a bit complicated. If you didn't do regular study, it was easy to fail, but if you practiced the stuff, passing was a breeze. So finals come around and Jerkface is out there bragging that he didn't need to study because his dad will pass him anyway. He took his confidence all the way to the exam hall. And then the results were out. He had scored 7 out of 100. We know because the professor called us all to the classroom and displayed his answer sheet on the projector. According to him, he was the 3rd student who had failed in his 20-year teaching career, and he couldn't be more disappointed that it was his son. The amount of verbal butt-whooping Jerkface received was enough to have him quivering like a wet cat in front of everyone. The next time he pulled the "Do you know who my dad is?" card, the standard answer he received was, "The one who failed you." He pretty soon stopped after that. He retook the exam the following year, failed again, and had to drop out. Wherever he is today, I hope he learned his lesson. When I was working at a public library, we had a few local celebrities come in from time to time. Most of them were nice, but one had a real stick up his butt. He would complain about having to stand in line, about late fees, and about everything else. We would just say, "Sorry, those are the rules," or "Thank you for being patient," even though he wasn't. One day, he and I were apparently both having a bad day, and when I told him there was a limit on how many DVDs or video games he could check out at a time, he slammed his hands down on the desk and raged. "Do you know who I Damn. This is a grown man, mind you. I was a little college student who barely looked old enough to drive. I was sick of his low-key bullying, so I just looked at him and said, "Yes, I do, Mr. X, and the rules still apply to you. Which of these would you like me to put back?" He was stunned. I don't think anyone had ever actually told him that the rules for everyone else did in fact apply to him as well. He was a little nicer after that. Not a lot nicer, but still. Video of a drunk college kid yelling at the cafeteria manager because he wanted bacon jalapeno mac and cheese. He hurls verbal abuse, pushes the manager, gets taken to the ground, and realizes his mistake when the cops show up. Him saying, "I'm so screwed," while being cuffed is super satisfying. When my brother was in school, he was horrifically bullied for being autistic, and his bully was the most entitled little brat I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. His father paid for boxing practice, karate lessons, and other martial arts. This made him think that he was the best at anything physical. My brother isn't overly fond of sports and prefers to read in the library. As the typical nerdy kid, he's a prime target for bullies. One day when the bully had cornered my brother up against a wall, my brother finally decided he wasn't just going to take it anymore. But he strongly dislikes violence and thus would not be fighting back. Instead, when my bully tried to punch him, my brother ducked. 3 broken fingers and a trip to the hospital later, the bully's father finds out what's been happening. All his extra classes and training were cancelled. He had all of his electronics and games sold, and if he wanted to have a car, he would have to work for every penny himself. A kid in college was a roommate of mine. He was always bratty and spoiled, but hung out with us as if he were a good friend, and we let him chill with us because sometimes he wasn't bad. Then one day we heard him arguing with his mom on the phone that he needed more money. From the ensuing argument, we learned that he had, in less than 1 year, burned through 30 grand that his parents had given him for food and discretionary spending. Mind you, he was not paying for tuition, or lodging, or his car with this money. It was basically just food money, as all those other things were already covered by his parents. He was calling his mother some really nasty things and hung up on her. Then his father called and they got in an argument, cussing each other out. At the end of that call, he threw his iPhone at the wall and shattered it. This was the original iPhone. Turns out they cut him off, and he basically had to drop out of school and drive back home out of state because he couldn't afford to do anything anymore, and of course was too good to work a plebs job. He added me on Facebook about a year later and was a late blooming 9/11 truther. Obama was president by this time, and the only thing I ever said to him on Facebook was a simple reply correcting one fact that he was wrong about in his 9/11 conspiracy theory. He then posted 4 replies in quick succession telling me to open my eyes and then blocked me. Seems like maybe he didn't learn his lesson. Simple and pure example from my part. There was only one coffee shop on my campus, operating out of the library building, and it was always crowded. So you pretty quickly learned that if you wanted coffee before class, you got there 20 minutes early, grabbed a newspaper, I'm old, sue me, and took your time. It was always funny watching incoming freshmen crowd the line 5 minutes before their 8 a.m. and slowly filter out in despair as they realized there was absolutely no way that they were reaching that sweet Sumatra nirvana in time. Cue this little freshman girl, dressed in classic campus t-shirt, jean shorts, blonde ponytail coming out of the ball cap starter pack, walking up, assessing the line stretching out the door, and boldly deciding to just sorta skip it. Now, the baristas were usually pretty cool with people skipping for simple things, dropping down a quarter for some Scantrons or a buck for a cookie, anything that didn't require interaction. Not this girl. She caught the barista's attention while the previous customer was still paying, and went, "Hi, yeah, can I get a latte please? Like, really quickly?" The line starts back there," replied the now slightly confused girl behind the counter. "But I have class," whined the freshman. There was an awkward pause before the barista responded, "You're on a college campus. Are you freaking serious? Why do you think all these people are here? Back of the line." "Oh," was the only thing the freshman girl thought to say. As she turned to look at a line full of people staring daggers back at her, she looked not upset or embarrassed, but sort of enraptured with this newfound understanding that she's just been imparted. It's like for the first time in her life, she realized that other people were in her way for reasons. It was actually kind of beautiful to watch, like a baby deer learning to walk for the first time. Better late than never. One of my favorite things about the military is that in a uniform, nobody can tell how privileged or unprivileged you might have been. It's a total blank slate, and for many, it's humbling to not get to / have to wear your social status on your sleeve. On my second ship, there was an E2 who grew up very wealthy and was a jerk about it. He wasn't afraid to let us know. He thought that he was better than his peers. There's a stereotype of the enlisted guy who thinks of himself as an officer, as a way to pretend that means anything. That's this guy in every way. And he would try to get out of crappy enlisted work because he was going to be an officer, probably even a commanding officer of a ship. So there we were, a few hours into his first deployment, and this jerk gets violently seasick. It lasted for days. I don't know if you've ever been around someone who can't open their eyes without yakking, but it's awful. You really feel bad for them. It's hard to watch someone go through. Not with this guy. I'll admit that I was a bit spoiled growing up, though I didn't think I was a brat. My mom had a maid that came in several times a week. When I went to college, several things were very different for me. I knew how to clean up after myself, but cleaning a bathroom was completely new. The biggest shock was laundry. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or how. I knew I was supposed to use detergent and softener, but I thought any soap would do, and didn't know what softener was. I had no idea how or when to add them either. Reality hit when a campus security guard came in and I asked how much of the dish soap I was supposed to use, and the man started laughing. He did help me get the right soap after and explained how to operate a washer dryer. I used to repair trails for the Forest Service, and I wouldn't call anybody a brat necessarily, but we're all pretty spoiled when it comes to manual labor and sleeping on the ground. On day 1, the bush plane flies the crew out to a grass airstrip about 40 miles east of town. Then you shoulder your pack, grab an axe and a shovel, and start hiking up the canyon, usually in the rain. Until you watch that plane disappear over the ridge, it's hard to imagine what you've signed up for. Hard labor all day, every day. Working, cooking, and camping in the rain that whole first month. No phone, no mail, no roof. And if you forgot something, you'll just have to live without it until the road opens in July. Wolves and mountain lions circle the camp at night. Sometimes bears come for your food. Everybody struggles for the first month. You'd see the kid who'd been the hard guy on his high school football team start to sit through lunch with his head in his hands just licked. Guys who are in the 1,000-pound club at their gym slumped up against a tree all evening, eating peanut butter for dinner because they were too beat to cook. Demanding as the job was, it wasn't really a physical issue. The best workers on the crew were hippie Jesus types with noodle arms who read Marcus Aurelius around the campfire at night. They just took everything as it came because no matter what, it just kept coming. Them and the Mormon ranch kids. I don't know how those kids came up, but nothing brought them down. In high school, one guy was a real jerk to everyone, and he had no sense of anyone but himself, and everyone kissed his butt because he was not only valedictorian of his class, but also star football, basketball, tennis, and track star. He was top dog for all the extracurriculars as well. He made my best friend cry multiple times just being a jerk towards her, and she had the unfortunate luck of being in his grade. He was also known as a player, just dating whoever he felt was hot enough for him, but would also put out for him. He honestly thought that nothing bad could ever happen to him because he was just that special. He graduated high school and went to his school of choice and immediately came out as gay on social media. Not long after that, he got his first boyfriend. Before the semester was even finished, his boyfriend cheated on him and he flunked out of his college and ended up having to go to another school. Last time I saw him, he was super polite and seemed to be rather humbled by his experience outside of our tiny town. I was out at a farm with my cousins for a party. It was more like an afternoon barbecue with all the parents sat talking and cooking while the kids ran around playing. Usual lazy afternoon in Africa. So anyway, I was 16 at the time, making me the oldest of the kids, and I'll admit that I was all back of the bus, too cool for school type of cringy teenager, and was practicing my casual aloofness. Now, there was this German couple there with this absolute monster child of 5 years old who made it his mission to terrorize all the other kids. The parents of this little Adolf sat beaming with delight watching their little ray of sunshine play with other children. Eventually, it became apparent that they were not going to do anything about it, and my parents told me to keep my cool and just ignore him, which I did because I didn't want to put my parents in an awkward situation. At some point in the afternoon, the kid found one of those plastic toddler toys. You know the ones where they can sit on it and push themselves around, but it also has a handle at the back that toddlers can use as a walker. So he finds this toy and is running around down the lawn full speed, ramming all the other kids. Now, I did tell him nicely that it was not good to hurt the other little boys and girls, but he just straight up ignored me and carried on with his game, giggling and chasing the other kids. He also decided that I was now fair game and I got rammed in the ankles and Achilles tendon a few times, and I'm fuming. His parents were watching and laughing the whole time. Eventually, I'm done with this little jerk, so I position myself in front of this small ditch, only about a quarter-inch deep and full of grass, and pull out my phone pretending to read messages. I was making myself an easy target for the little brat. He comes charging up behind me, aiming for my heels again. The front wheels go into the little ditch, stopping the walker. The kid was pushing it so fast that his momentum carried him right over the handlebars, right over the push toy, and past me, face planting into the dirt, going full scorpion. There was no blood, but he lay there screaming. The best part was that the parents watched the whole thing take place, and they and the other parents never suspected that I stood in that exact spot for that exact reason. His parents were kind of peeved that the kid hurt himself while I was watching the kids, but they couldn't say anything, so they just kept the boy close the rest of the day. So this story isn't about a child. This was a full-grown woman, maybe mid-30s, who very clearly was handed everything in life. Spoiled, selfish, entitled, whatever you want to call it, she was way out of touch with reality. So I grew up in a very nice upper middle class area with nothing but houses for miles around. At the center is a small block with a little grocery store, a few boutiques, restaurants, and a drugstore. It being the only shopping center anywhere around tends to attract really snobby people. Anyway, I was maybe 14 or 15 and went to the drugstore to grab something or other and happened to wander past the makeup aisle. This drugstore is pretty large, so their makeup selection is huge, with every brand you can think of taking up one whole wall of the building. I had just rounded the corner where I saw this woman sitting on the ground just as I saw the manager coming around the opposite corner making a beeline for her like a bulldog. He stops, arms crossed, and the following happens.
Ma'am, I hope you know you're going to have to pay for those.
What?
The makeup. All of these packages you've opened, you're going to have to pay for them.
He gestured about towards where I was standing, still at the end of the aisle. I looked down to my right and saw what he was pointing at, the pressed powder compacts. She'd opened one of each shade ranging from ivory to warm beige and left the remains in piles at the bottom of each display. That's right, I said each. She went through every single brand and opened the packaged components. And to make it worse, each brand usually makes more than one type of pressed powder. There had to have been at least 40 of them. Her, agitated, "What do you mean? I don't understand. Why do I have to pay for them when I only need one?" Him, having a stroke,
"Because you've destroyed them. And because you've used them. We can no longer sell those to anyone else because they've been contaminated by you."
Her, becoming irate, "Well, I needed to test them to match my skin tone." It was at this point I realized that next to all the compacts were the used makeup sponges that come with them, as well as what appeared to be used baby wipes. Him, with an impending aneurysm,
"Well, I hope it was worth all the money you now owe us."
This was about 15 years ago, so the remainder of the conversation is fuzzy. I know she was panic crying and was refusing to pay, and he was threatening to call the cops. But I had to leave at that point, so I didn't get to see the outcome. But I do know that I did a little math when I got home. Nowadays, one of those compacts will cost about $10 each, but back then I'd say 5 to 6. So she had to pay at least $240 at the end of that. My friend is this entitled younger brother who acts like the world revolves around him. While his dad is stern with him, his mom babies this behavior and he can get away scot-free with almost anything. He gets angry very easily, and even at the slightest things. I was over at my friend's house, and while we were downstairs, we heard a loud crash from his brother's room. It turns out he was playing Fortnite on his TV and threw the controller into the glass table, which shattered. My friend called me later in the day over Discord and told me how after his dad came back, he grounded his brother for a month, and he wasn't allowed to play video games or go over to a friend's house. He had to pay for a new table with his allowance and had to do chores. He got what he deserved. Went on a double date with my boyfriend, his friend, and his friend's date. The whole evening she was rude, snobby, and overall a demanding person that felt entitled to whatever she wanted. She was rude to the waitstaff and suggested we tip them nothing for refusing to refund her order after she ate the whole thing and complained about everything. On the car ride back, she started driving, then halfway through the drive announced she didn't want to drive anymore. The rest of us had been drinking, so we all refused to take over. She said, "Fine, but I'm not driving either." Let go of the steering wheel and slammed on the brakes. We got rear-ended and it was her car, so no cost to the rest of us. But it was instant karma for her behavior and attitude. When I was in high school, there was this horribly bratty rich kid who loved to pick on others, push people around, and play the "do you know who my dad is" card a lot. Let's call him Todd. I hated this kid all through school. Final year of high school, I'd had a bad day one day and it obviously showed. Todd sees me walking in the hall and makes some snide remark about my shirt. I promptly tell him to shove it as I'm not in the mood. He walks over to me while I'm at my locker and slams my locker door and shoves me. I recall that he said something else, but I honestly don't remember what it was. I just remember that I saw red and drove my fist into his nose like a truck. I stomped away all teenage and angsty. Got called to the office the next day. Todd is sitting there with his father and the principal. I knew I was screwed. The principal shows us all the security camera footage of what went down. I'm assuming an expulsion is coming my way when Todd's father puts his hand on my shoulder and smiles. He tells Todd to say thank you, and we both look at him dumbfounded. "Why would I say thank you? He broke my nose," says Todd. And his father responds with, "Because if I had been there and seen you act like that, I'd have killed you." He stood up and left, and I was excused to return to class. Todd never bothered me again. My former roommate's sister got slapped pretty hard. She knew absolutely nothing of the real world. Couldn't do laundry, cook food, clean, nothing. Her mom paid her share of the rent and she didn't even have to work while she was going to college and staying under our roof. She had the perfect setup. She was so dense, she kept her social security card in her wallet and it was stolen the first day she moved to the big city, even though she was warned. But oh, she knew better. Later on, she decided she didn't like living with us and our rules, such as you can't let your friends live in our apartment. It's against the lease. If your friends are gonna come over and make a big mess and eat all the food in the house that we pay for, we need compensation. We're fresh from college, low-income wage earners at the time. We can't afford it. And she needed to be respectful of quiet hours and clean up after herself. So she decided to make her daddy move her out so she could move in with a diagnosed schizophrenic who refused to take her meds and was a hoarder. Her mother and father said, "If you move out, we won't support you." She did it anyway. Oh, how she complained and moaned. "I had to get a job at Burgerville. The people there stole my paycheck from my wallet because I kept all of my paycheck in cash in it. We can't afford internet. It's so expensive. Food is so expensive." Well, she ended up quitting school and moving back in with her mom.
People who have surprisingly woken up admitted into hospital. What happened? I hopped into the back of a mate's pickup after a rugby game, went to sleep and woke up in ICU in traction with no feeling from my waist down. Turns out we had a head-on collision with a drunk driver and I went through the back of the cab picking up a host of broken body parts including 4 compressed vertebrae. A year and a number of surgeries later, I walked out of hospital an inch shorter and with enough metal in me to set off metal detectors at airports. I was the lucky one. The other 3 guys in the truck never woke up afterwards. 20 years and it still gets me. The accident happened in Zimbabwe, where I grew up. I've traveled a fair bit since then, but I'm now a bona fide Kiwi. I didn't find out about the others for a while. Aside from being zonked on pain meds, I don't think I was capable of understanding what had happened. Visitation was restricted in the ICU to my folks, but the day after I was moved out, most of the 2 senior teams and some of the staff pitched up to tell me the nasty truth. The tiny ward was crammed with big, burly, ugly guys crying their hearts out, and I loved every one of them for it. Not sure where I was going with this, but I've ended up here. Here's a thought from an old guy with a messed up body who walks with a constant limp, has tried every legal and many non-legal relief options for the daily thrum of pain, who has had 2 decades of survivor's guilt, and who knows firsthand the debris that is left behind when someone is tragically and unceremoniously yanked from life, their family, and their friends. If you're not 100% in control, don't put the key in the ignition. Don't put yourself in harm's way, and don't risk messing up someone else's life. Call a cab, take a bus, walk, but for Christ's sake, don't drive. I think he covered everything that I felt like saying about this topic. 18-year-old me got super wasted on Smirnoff watermelon vodka at some little club in Clearwater, Florida. Apparently, I fell off a bar stool and busted my head. When I woke up, I wasn't even sure what state I was in. I accidentally called my friend's mom in North Dakota trying to get a ride to somewhere other than the hospital. A decade later, and I still can't drink anything with that watermelon flavor. I get that feeling, not with artificial watermelon flavors. I love that in sweets, in drinks, whatever. I absolutely love it. The actual fruit watermelon, kind of mid, not gonna lie. But I can't drink sours with a Z. It's a drink. It's disgusting to me now. I was 12 in 1982, woke up in a hospital bed feeling fine, no idea what happened, nobody else in the room. Last person I remember hanging out with was my friend, Scott. So I call his house, his mom answered, advised me to call my parents. No answer at the home phone. So I'm sitting in this bed trying to figure out why I'm even here. I finally discover that the rolling table over the bed opens up and there's a mirror under the lid. Across my forehead and down the whole right side of my face are fresh abrasions. Oh. That's why. Finally, get a hold of Scott and learn the story, which I still don't remember. Was riding my bike down a sidewalk near the grade school. Sidewalk takes a 45-degree left turn and I cut the corner. Grass is deep and a little wet and my front wheel catches the edge of the sidewalk, flipping me over. I landed on my face, dragging against the other edge of the sidewalk, knocked out cold. Another neighborhood kid was in the area, hustled back to alert my parents. My dad took me to the hospital in his car and I woke up the next day. Yes, my parents just left me in the hospital by myself. Waking up in hospital on your own as a kid would absolutely suck. I mean, I remember being admitted to hospital for, I won't go into it, but, it does suck. Hospitals just suck. Was at the pool. Next thing I know, I wake up in a hospital bed, feeling very cold and my throat hurts. Turns out I had actually drowned, but the lifeguard had pulled me out and reanimated me for about 45 minutes. Then I was flown to the hospital by helicopter where I lay in a coma for 2 days, during which they kept my body temperature low to prevent cerebral damage caused by lack of oxygen. I could go home a week after the accident. The way they described the lifeguard reanimating them, I'm picturing like a necromancer or something. My brother and I were outside playing with squirt guns. This was 2001, so I would have been 11. Next thing I know, it's Easter Sunday. I was in a hospital bed with a massive headache and blurred vision, and the last thing I remembered was 4 days ago. Apparently, I fell backwards and smacked my dome on the curb hard enough to fracture my skull and bruise my brain. Got 2 weeks off school, which was cool back then, and I've had to wear glasses ever since. Apparently, according to my mom, the first sign of consciousness in the hospital was me getting out of bed, taking a whiz on the floor, and then going back to sleep for 2 more days. The whole thing was a weird experience. Being in hospital in general, especially when you're freaking 11 years old or something and all alone, would suck. I understand why it would be a weird experience. I was running a half marathon with a friend and we had just passed the 10-mile mark and I felt like I was getting into a groove after I struggled a bit the previous few miles. Woke up the next day in the ICU with my family all around me. Heat stroke plus rhabdomyolysis. I was admitted with a temperature of 108.6 and they were telling my family to prepare for the worst. I had to stay in hospital for a few days and then take it easy for a few months, but otherwise came out unscathed. Don't recommend it. Rhabdomyolysis, often called rhabdo, is a serious medical condition that can be fatal or result in permanent disability. Rhabdo occurs when damaged muscle tissues release its proteins and electrolytes into the blood. These substances can damage the heart and kidneys and cause permanent disability or even death. And that's what rhabdomyolysis is. Woke up in the hospital with my roommate and her mom asleep in the chairs in the room. I started freaking out because I was 7 months pregnant and my pregnant belly was obviously not pregnant. My screaming woke them up. My fiancé and I had been hit by a drunk driver, killing my fiancé, and I lost the baby. I had been in a coma for 3 days. I have some really gnarly scars that my kids like to make up crazy stories about. My favorite being the time I fought off 3 knife-wielding psychotic carnies and murdered them with my bare hands. Well, you know what? I'm glad there was a semblance of a happy ending for this lady. I was 16 and hit by a Ford F-350. I am a tiny human, I'm under 5 foot, and this truck hit me going 40 miles per hour when I was in the crosswalk. The hit launched me across the entire intersection. I don't remember anything 20 minutes before until 10 days later. When I finally woke up, I had been in a coma for 5 days. Both my lungs had collapsed, I had 3 blood transfusions, a chest tube to drain the internal bleeding, 3 surgeries, and the whole left side of my body broken. I couldn't walk and my vision and memory had been damaged. It's been 6 years and I'm doing great now. You wouldn't even know anything happened to me except I have memory issues and arthritis. But I like to think I came out on top in this situation. I think they did as well. I was at a party with a friend in some college town. The street we were on had these 3-story apartments built side by side. The whole street was partying, even on the roofs. We got separated and it was time to go. We don't live in that town. Anyways, I see an ambulance going down the street and I knew it was for my idiot roommate. So I followed the ambulance and sure enough, he was laying on the ground barely conscious. He tried to jump from one building to the next and didn't even come close. Luckily for him, his head broke the fall. A few weeks later, he finally asked, "Oh yeah, hey man. That night we went to Lawrence and I woke up in hospital. What happened?" Yes, it was Lawrence, Kansas. I don't know the street. It was 2001 or 2002. Yes, he did have a concussion. He was fully unconscious for a couple minutes and everybody thought he was dead. They said he was laying there with his eyes open, unresponsive. It wasn't until someone dumped a bottle of water on him that he was roused into a semi-conscious state. Other than having chronic headaches for a month, he was fine. Glad everything worked out, but what a stupid prick. Woke up in the hospital, too weak to press a PCA pump, being told I'd been in a catastrophic motorcycle accident. Had suffered extensive injuries to my entire, except my left arm, spine, and head, thank the universe, body, and had been in a medically induced coma for 5 weeks. I lost any memory of the event or the week prior to it. I was hit by some unrepentant doucheburgers who were out on parole, repeat offenders, and decided it would be a great idea to assault a 7-Eleven clerk, rob the store, and lead the police in a 30-minute chase at excess speeds up to 100 plus. Their joyride ended when they went the wrong way on the freeway and took my on-ramp going 70 miles per hour against the traffic and slammed into me at a net speed of 120 miles per hour. I was going 50. We know all this from the police report. I never had a chance since the on-ramp sloped up, then back down to enter the freeway and I hit these guys at the crest of the hill. Never saw them. The impact sliced through their engine block, so they ran on foot after that. The police recorded their statements after being followed by helicopter and being apprehended as "what you arresting me for." They got 9 and 5 years in a plea deal and I was notified when they were each let out after serving less than half the sentence. Please note they were 100% sober, knew they hit me, and they left me to die. I'm a generally compassionate person, or at least I try to be, but I hope their lives are a living hell and that they live a long time. I hope they never get the chance to hurt someone again, but I fully expect that that's what they've done. For my own mental health, I'll never try to find out what's become of them. This was over 10 years ago and I have a good life now. Loving GF, a mortgage, a super smart border collie, everything I ever wanted, although it's been a serious struggle. I didn't get any money except for $50K from the Victims of Violent Crimes Fund, plus, remarkably, their auto insurance. My medical bills were $3 million plus, but I was insured, thankfully, since I just started the job 6 months prior. I used that money in my hospital/recovery time to get my MBA and have worked hard as hell to move up in my new career since I knew I had to change. I'm not very agile anymore. I'm still severely and permanently disabled. I'll never run again, nor have any real balance. I need a cane and lost the use of my dominant arm. But I'm lucky since I still have my faculties and look relatively normal. I don't own a motorcycle anymore and will never attempt to ride again. You need 100% of your physical faculties as well as mental to do it safely. I don't blame my motorcycle at all. I miss riding and probably wouldn't have fared much better in those speeds in a car. If you ride and are reading this, please make sure you buy the best safety gear and wear it every time. I'm only here today because I did, and no amount of skill would have saved me from being in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong time. I was wearing a Nolan flip face helmet, $300 at the time. Thank you, Nolan, for your outstanding quality and commitment to safety. I still have the helmet, and it's scratched and cracked all the way through. That could have been my skull. I agree with your sentiment. Screw those guys, but I do believe you would have fared a lot better in a car. Wife, 2-year-old son, and myself went to visit a couple of friends out in the country. Had some food, had a couple of drinks myself, had an amazing time. Wife was sober. I was wrangling my young one back into his car seat to go home. He was so overtired and unhappy, but I made sure he was good and snug, and pulled out of the driveway after waving goodbye to our friends. I came to almost a month and a half later. I could barely move my legs and arms due to the neuropathy and fatigue. I had a feeding tube up my nose and a colostomy bag. The doctors told me that I had actually come to a couple days before while I was still in intensive care, but the nature of the anesthetic they had me on meant I kept kinda waking up, fading back, and forgetting everything. At this point, I was able to remember things normally. They told me right off the bat my son was fine, completely unharmed and in the care of a very old and dear friend with 3 kids of his own already. My wife was alive and relatively uninjured with the exception of some damage to her leg and a moderate brain injury that she would recover from slowly. They kept the details about the accident from me for a few weeks while I was recovering, but basically, my wife missed a stop sign in the middle of a dark, poorly marked country road and we got T-boned by an SUV. Other driver was fine. It's been over 2 years since the accident. I got the strength back to walk again, but because of pins, bolts, plates in my left ankle and shin, I'll never likely be able to run again. The neuropathy in my legs wore off and eventually wore off in my arms to the point where I can use them normally again, but it was a lot of therapy retraining them. Suffered PTSD about 10 months after by the time I was back at home. From time to time, I still have nightmares about something that I don't technically have the ability to remember. That is just downright scary. Smash cut to a month and a half later and you don't remember anything, but you're getting PTSD-driven nightmares about it? Not me, but my girlfriend's sister jumped out of a window Tuesday morning. She's schizophrenic, so there's other issues there besides just trying to self-delete. She's still sedated and hasn't woke up. Broken vertebrae in neck and lower back, but they don't think she's paralyzed. Slight bleeding on the brain that they're relatively sure didn't cause damage. Busted ribs and torn up lungs they had to remove part of yesterday in surgery. Some other broken bones, etc. They have her sedated/unconscious to prevent her from moving due to the broken vertebrae. I wonder if she'll be disappointed when she wakes up later in the week. On the plus side, her parents are having a Cambodian guy come in to do an exorcism, so that's going to fix everything. Love her, but her parents are something else. Old school Vietnamese. Maybe this is just me, but I imagine she was exceedingly disappointed when she woke up. Snowshoeing, and by snowshoeing I mean a short, slow trip on a relatively flat, groomed trail because I in no way represent an athlete. Finished the trip and am standing on the edge of a parking lot looking over Lake Tahoe from Echo Summit. Next to me, two guys are filming some sort of ski ad, I assume. One guy skis down the cliff, hits a mogul, does a somersault, and then somehow stops to climb back up and repeat. Guy 2 is filming. Skier guys may be covering about a football field distance over and over again. It's a cliff and he acts about like he's getting up during an ad to get a soda from the TV. Ski, mogul, flip, stop, up, repeat. I enjoy the view and muse on the comparison between my pathetic activity and this guy's and think, okay, time to go. I immediately fall on the ground and can hear my wrist snap as it's caught in the strap on my ski pole. Get up, walk painfully back to my car, a quarter mile, curse all the families driving erratically and allowing their children to careen around the snow play park. I'm a little grumpy with the pain, then realize I can't get my keys out of my pants pocket. Ask a woman who looks like a mum to help. She steps into that extremely uncomfortable, intimate distance and reaches her hand deep into my disgusting pocket and fishes out my keys. It was very awkward. I thank her profusely and to this day will bless her and wish that she and her descendants may people the earth. Drive to Barton Hospital for a temporary cast. Drive home. It's not easy driving with one arm and it's no doubt illegal, but I made it. I have another equally exciting story about a broken and dislocated shoulder from a bike ride. Doesn't exactly fit the criteria of this topic, but it was a nice shake-up, I suppose. I remember parts where the paramedics were taking me to the hospital in the ambulance, asking me about a 666 tattoo I had and something about how one of their sisters also attempted self-deletion. But I lost consciousness again before I could say I didn't remember even thinking about self-deletion. I woke up in the hospital and apparently I drank way too much and my dad found me unconscious. Everyone thought I tried to delete myself because I was alone, so it took a while before they just let me go without being taken to a psych ward. I was actually pretty depressed, and now I wonder if I was trying to die. I just feel bad about apparently throwing up on my cat before anyone found me. My dad said she was meowing next to me until someone came home. Not gonna lie, I almost lost it when they mentioned that they threw up on their cat. But I also have to commend that cat for its level of loyalty. TLDR, woke up from a coma with fungal pneumonia, spent about 76 days in CCU, had left lung removed. I might have a story that fits in here. Happened about 3.5 years ago. I'd been kind of sick with the flu for a few weeks. Couldn't seem to shake it. I'd get a little better, then a bit worse. This was right before Christmas 2012. That year, Christmas Eve and Christmas was on a Monday and Tuesday. So I was just pushing myself to get to that sweet 4-day weekend, thinking I'd just relax and that'd get me past it. So I rested hard all weekend, wasn't eating much, just stayed in the easy chair. The day after Christmas, I still wasn't feeling up for work. I was still at my folks' house for the holiday Wednesday, so my mom being my mom was all, if you're too sick to work, you're going to the doctor. I didn't have insurance at the time, so I hadn't been. Went to one of those urgent care places instead. I was there for a little while, don't remember much around this point. I remember we left after a while, then waking up in CCU about 12 to 14 days later. Turns out I have the beats. Now, I hear from a lot of people that this is how they find out they are diabetic. Either very low blood sugar or you go into DKA and get flu/pneumonia. This is where my story takes a house-like turn. Most of the following info I got secondhand after the fact. When leaving the urgent care place, apparently my mother had been told to take me straight to the ER. She got me to the closest one and they took me right in. Didn't even wait on the paperwork. They knew right away about the DKA and pneumonia, but something else was wrong. They did MRIs, ran blood tests, checked for strokes, heart attack, about everything. Something was still off and they didn't know what. I went into respiratory failure that evening and they had to put me in a coma and on life support. They sent the blood to the labs. Now, in-house, they get results back in a few hours and try something else, then run another test and try something else. I'm not sure how accurate that is for most situations. In my case, they had determined there was an abnormal kind of infection in or in addition to the pneumonia. The culture had to grow for 10 days for them to see what was in my blood to make a solid diagnosis. So the data came back and the infectious disease doctors working on me spent several days poring over everything she could find to learn what it was. She found a picture in an old textbook of a fungus called rhizopus. Once they figured this out, they were able to find a medicine that could treat it, though it'd be a 13-week course of intravenous treatment and it was highly toxic just for kicks. So they pulled me off the sedation after 10 days and it took me a few days to wake up. Apparently, they told my folks to start planning my funeral, so that's creepy. When I woke up, they started the treatments the next day. I wasn't out of the woods yet though. After I woke, the pulmonary doctor did a brachioscope to see my lungs. She said they looked like they were full of pink fluff, like cotton candy or pink marshmallow fluff. That was on Wednesday, January 9th, 2013. She did another scope that Friday and said it looked less inflamed, so that was great news. And she said she'd do another on Monday. The weekend passes. She comes back and runs another. This time, when she put the tube in, apparently a sweet odor was released immediately. My mom says she said, "Do you smell that? Something smells sweet." My right lung looked even better. My left lung, well, she said looked black and green and spiky, so that's a bad thing, I guess. The lung had begun to die. This is a part I remember for myself really clearly. I woke up from that procedure and the nurse told me to wait a moment and left the room. She came back with the pulmonary doctor, a surgeon, and my mom and dad. Oh gee, mom and dad have been crying but are smiling through it. That's not a good sign. The surgeon explained what they found and said we pretty much have two choices. We can do surgery and remove your left lung, and you have about a 50-50 chance of surviving, or we can keep you on the medicine and do everything else we can for you. Now, even being all doped up and half asleep, I knew that meant praying for a miracle and making me comfortable while I died. Now, I'm a Christian. I have faith in miracles and such, but I also believe one of the greatest things we have as a species is a brilliant and curious mind that has led to such things as music, art, bacon, and medicine. So I'd be a fool, in my opinion, to ignore the advice and help of the fine doctors and nurses in front of me. And to be honest, I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I've never had a major surgery. It'll be interesting if I come through. So I wrote surgery on the little marker board I had since I couldn't speak. I had surgery the next morning where they removed my full left lung. Afterwards, I remained in CCU for a total of 76 days, 99 days total in the hospital. I still had to run the full 13-week course of that medicine. I had a lot of rehab and therapy for months after. A lot of it dealing with the extensive muscle atrophy in my legs and arms and pretty much everywhere. 3 years later, I've much improved. I lost a bit of mobility in my feet, both from the atrophy and the diabetic neuropathy. My stamina isn't what it was, obviously, as my oxygen capacity is about 55% of what it was, we think. At rest, I still can hit about 95 to 97% blood saturation, which is normal. At moderate to heavy activity, it drops pretty fast. Still working on improving that. Got a good job, got a girl. Overall, things are actually a lot better than it was before. Nothing like almost dying to spice up your life. I feel like I emphasized the fine doctors and nurses a bit too much. It made it sound like they were all kind of sexy. Like everyone else on here, I'm glad things mostly worked out and there was no loss of human life in these. I can only imagine what it would be like to just wake up and it's like, oh damn, like what happened to me? It'd be very interesting, of course, but it'd be scary as hell. Actually, on that note, I do remember being in hospital, going under anesthetic, and then waking up like 2 days later or something. Of course, in comparison to a lot of people on here, that is absolutely nothing.
Medical professionals of Reddit, what is the worst hookup-related injury you've seen at your workplace? Exotic special ordered venomous spider placed where the sun don't shine. Guy called an ambulance because he wasn't sure if he could put bug bite cream up there. As the packaging said, for external use only. Lost entire traverse section of necrotic bowel. They lived, but they poop in a bag now. At first I thought, how crazy do you have to be to do that? But then I instantly thought, I'm gonna be sus of people that like spiders from now on. Mini lava lamp stuck in the rectum. Power cord was sticking out like a tail. Mini lava lamp stuck in a rectum? Sounds like a Card Against Humanity's card. Did you try unplugging it and then plugging it back in? Broken pee-pee. Dude's testes were the size of grapefruits. I assumed the internal artery was pumping blood into them from somewhere. Wasn't MA then, now in med school. It was a neat injury, but nothing we could do for him at the urgent care. He needed surgery for sure. Did see a bottle stuck up in a bum x-ray as well. I'm not one to judge. Keep on freaking on. But don't put glass up your bum, please. Anyone who's had the misfortune of watching One Man, One Jar in the mid-2000s knows better. Childhood memory unlocked. Countless cases of stuff stuck you know where. Pee-pee sticks, lady toys, cucumbers, toilet bowl brushes. If it's possible to get it in there, then someone's needed it surgically removed. Toilet bowl brush was the most shocking. However, the funniest was reconstructing a giant white, oddly realistic, veiny looking pee-pee on the back table to make sure they had pulled it all out. Pro tip, if you get something stuck up there, don't make up some fantastical story about unclothed light bulb changing. We know how it got there. You know how it got there. There's no shame in liking that stuff. Just tell us your personal time went awry. It would be kind of funny if a doctor did believe those wild stories and then was like, man, I never thought that could happen. I used to work weekend night shifts. Had a young girl come in one weekend. Despite her age, she had a hip replacement and it was dislocated. ER put it back in and she went on her way. Next weekend, she's back again. Same thing. Third weekend in a row, and there she is. Finally, I ask what she's doing to dislocate her hip so much, and she says her boyfriend keeps bending her leg back too far while they hook up. I told her to try different positions. Talk about not caring about your partner's well-being. Dude stuck a pencil up his urethra. What is porous? It got stuck. For a day. He couldn't pee around it, and initially, that's what his complaint was, urinary retention. Finally, in the exam room, when the doc asked him what the freak, with the eraser sticking out of his pee-pee, the guy finally fessed up. He ended up needing surgery. He was also like 70 years old enough to know better. Damn, in his 70s and still being a freak? You go, Grandpa. Uncle-in-law, who's an anesthesiologist, had a patient come in that had poured concrete in his bum while trying to make a custom pee-pee stick. They had to chisel the concrete out of his bum. Excuse me, he did what now? Back in medical school, I was on a surgery rotation with a classmate. Our first day, we got split into groups. By chance, my first case was an appendectomy. His first case was helping deliver a jewel-encrusted pee-pee stick from the bum of a 250-pound guy. He was at the business end when it crowned and was responsible for catching as the surgeon pushed from above. Gives a new meaning to the terms pitch and catch. Worked at a physical therapy clinic for years. 78-year-old man came in with a herniated disc in his neck after satisfying his girlfriend. He was a longtime patient and friend of the therapist, so we got the whole story. Our patient, P, was old, rich, and single, and loved all the sleazy bits that came with it. One day, his 39-year-old girlfriend asked him to return the favor, so P goes to town for the first time ever at age 78. Not really knowing what he was doing, he went at her like a dog drinking water, his words. A few moments later, he felt a pop and his arm went numb. He came to us with a nearly useless left arm about 2 days later. My boss was laughing so hard during the eval that I went into the treatment room to check on him. P insisted I stay and hear the whole story. P died a couple months later from something unrelated. I miss that crusty old bastard a lot. Wait a minute, for the first time at 78, Mr. P? Come on now, don't be selfish like Mr. P, everyone. Also, he died a few months later. Anybody else kind of thinking it's a little suspicious? A janitor heated up petroleum jelly and injected it into his pee-pee with a syringe. He was trying to make it bigger. He kept adding more. Another janitor saw him and decided to do the same. So it turns out, with nowhere to go, petroleum jelly forms granulomas under the skin, which gets infected. Word was the tip of his thing and the base wouldn't work anymore, only the middle, and abscesses formed, resulting in what was described as the pee-pee looking like, and you might want to brace yourself for this, maggots had burrowed tunnels through it. Janitor 1 was hospitalized for several weeks. As for Janitor 2, he ended up with several ulcerating wounds in his pelvic region. You could stick a finger in them. They were that big. Apparently injecting your thing with petroleum jelly is fairly common. Some girls have also attempted to inject this in their chesticles to give themselves implants. It has led to deaths because bits and pieces of it can dislodge and travel to your lungs. First off, ew. Secondly, I think it's important to say that many people in the world are not happy with their bodies, so I would suggest therapy to get help with that issue. And after that, if you still want to improve your body, at least seek out a medical professional. Typically not a medical professional, but I have a friend who was a hospital pharmacist. He said a patient came in with a coffee thermos in his bum, cap first. He got the rest of the thermos out, but the cap stayed. After a couple of days, he finally decided to go to the hospital because he couldn't get it out. The cap ended up festering bacteria, and he had to have part of his colon removed. Now the guy is in his 30s with a colostomy bag. I've seen a crystal clear imprint of a clothing iron to the bum. The thought process was something like, if candle wax equals kinky, iron equals mega kinky? I don't know. Also, a pair of junkies got wasted and shot a substance in one of the guy's members, and we had to fillet the whole thing. He was distraught about the size difference after. This is why you shouldn't do substances, kids. Makes your member smaller. I had a patient come into the ER with runs of VTAC, dangerous arrhythmia, because his boyfriend sprinkled substance powder on a pee-pee stick and used it on him. It's very absorbent up there, and suddenly your heart is crapping out at the rate of 220 beats per second. Kinda hookup related? On Andrews Air Force Base in the 1980s, a guy was caught doing bad things to a family member. As the cops arrived, he sat on the front concrete steps and hammered his junk off. My mom worked on him in the emergency room. He still ended up in jail. Well, at least he gave himself more justice than the court system would. 18-year-old kid had a cheap pee-pee stick break way up in his bum, was bleeding and needed surgery. In my state, you're not legally an adult until 19, so he had to call his mom for consent, and she demanded staying with him through his entire ER visit. If you want the details, it was probably 7 to 9 inches of plastic. Top 2 inches are what broke off. Also, yes, the medical consent rules are screwy. Applies to SA as well, unless the parent was the suspected assailant. Not my story, but my mom's. She used to work in the oncology department at her hospital a while back. One day she came home, sits me down and says, syphilis in the eye. You always make sure your partner is clean. Don't take their word for it. I don't care what you do, just syphilis in the eye. That's all I needed to hear. Labia hematoma. Couple had hookup time, then got into a fight. He kicked her in the crotch. This bursted a blood vessel in the labia, which made it swell to the size of a large pear. That crap hurts. She used many colorful words to describe what she thought of him. My friend works at an ER in a small rural area in Canada. Apparently, this young guy comes in and has a can of Axe body spray stuck up his rectum. He was extremely embarrassed, and his excuse was that he accidentally sat on it. The crazy thing about this story is that I bet if the dude farted, you probably wouldn't be able to tell if it was him or the Axe body spray. A guy came into the emergency department because his bum hurt after his boyfriend, put his whole hand up there? He had torn his bowel and had to get a colostomy. It wasn't life-ending or anything, but imagine going to the ED after hooking up and getting told that you're getting a freaking colostomy. I had a woman in her 50s that had her boyfriend do the same thing, while they had recreationally taken muscle relaxers. She apparently was really into it and wanted him to be rougher with her. Then he pulled his arm out and noticed that there was blood everywhere. He called for an ambulance and she had a significant bowel tear. She had surgery and also got a colostomy, and several complications post-op and ended up on a ventilator long-term, unable to wean. Her grown children didn't know what caused it. The boyfriend was very attentive and stayed by her side. He was very nice, and I know he had to be dealing with some guilt. Eventually, her prognosis was so poor that they withdrew life support and she died. Every time I had conversations with her boyfriend, I noticed how huge his fists and forearms were. My dark sense of humor is telling me to make a joke, but in all seriousness, people do need to be more careful with what they take/use during hookup time. Nothing worse than pee-pee sticks, lady toys, and other objects stuck where the sun don't shine. One chap did say that he likes sticking things up there, and that's fair enough, but the strange excuses are usually the most entertaining part of it. Worst genital injury was some guy who drilled his junk with the cordless drill doing DIY. Don't secure your workpiece between your knees if you want to be sure to keep both testicles, gentlemen. I was actually reading an article about kink-friendly medicine today, and how much of a shame it is that there's so much stigma. All the kinksters agree that they should be open with their doctors, but most are not, and many will use urgent cares instead of their primary care due to reporting issues of judging by their practitioners. It causes real health issues. I'm still embarrassed about having to explain to my insurance that I both ran my car off an icy road and also got flogged so hard I had to stop because my spine hurt in the same week. So I couldn't really tell which one caused my back injury. They wanted to send it to my car insurance company. Oh, and they called during work hours, of course. I would have busted out laughing if I heard my coworker telling their insurance that they got their back blown out and needed to file a claim. Infected penile implant. His member looked like a purple tall boy beer can. They had to take him to the OR, literally filleted his man parts, take out the implant, and wash it all out. Worst part is they left him open for several days. Ick. I've actually read that men that get penile implants, it's not guaranteed that your junk works after. I think I'd rather have my stuff work than it looking better. But hey, to each their own. My mother worked in the ER and told me a story about a guy who was wasted on fairy dust and couldn't get it up. His friend told him to stick a chicken bone in his pee-pee and he would be able to hook up. He shoved the chicken bone in knuckle first and it shredded the tip of his pee-pee. A coworker was getting divorced. One night, his soon-to-be ex called about something and she could tell he was having a bad day. So to cheer him up, she had told him about how while she and her new boyfriend were hooking up, he shoved a pee-pee stick up her bum and it got stuck. After failed attempts to remove it, they went to the ER and she had to get surgery. After surgery, doctor sanitized it and gave it back to her. And in case you want to know, the story didn't make him feel better. How can any sane person think telling your ex about your new partner and you hooking up would ever be a good story to tell them? Does it count if I saw it prior to the doctor? Did some AV work for a friend of mine that managed a swing club. He was hooking up with some girl on this sort of rolling gurney/bed out in the middle of the lounge area, with like 50 plus people enjoying the show. They accidentally slid off the bed and in the jumble and ensuing thump to the ground, an audible pop was heard. He fractured his member. That pop that was heard was the poor guy's junk. Almost immediately it looked like a deflated purple balloon. This was many years ago now, and you can rest assured that I never let old broken pee-pee forget. Hey, what are best friends for, right? My family is constantly in and out of the local ER. Last time I went there for a concussion, there was a man in there with his wife for heart palpitations during hookup time. He started having a slow heart attack while they were doing the deed, and they ended up admitting him. There was also a girl in there, wasted out of her mind, claiming she hooked up with multiple different guys, like 3 or 6, and had gotten pregnant from all of them. But then her friends had kidnapped her and had given her a particular brownie with stuff in it, but she didn't know what kind of stuff. And the brownie made her lose her baby, and now she was dying. According to the conversation the doctor kept having with her, she had come in 3 times in that month claiming she was pregnant and worried about her baby. Each time they tested and all the tests came back negative. She started her period and it caused her to insist that she had lost the multiple men's baby. And it was the fault of the brownie she had in San Diego 3 days ago. She started wailing when they gave her some meds to calm her down, claiming that they were killing her baby with injections, and that she would call up her friends who kidnapped her and force her to eat the deadly brownie as proof. I'm not sure what ended up happening to her and her apparent psychotic break, but I'm hoping that they got her some help because she was clearly out of it. Dentist here. In dental school, definitely saw a girl with an inflamed palate that was worried about an infection. Did some tests, nothing looked infectious. Faculty member pulls me aside and was like, yeah, that's a bruise from a certain type of action if you catch my drift. Might not be a major injury, but definitely memorable. We actually learned/saw this in oral pathology class. It can happen because of continuous trauma to the palate. Just like you get a bruise on your arm with continuous hits, even if they aren't too hard. I'd recommend swishing with a saltwater rinse a couple times a day for a few days to help with the swelling, and maybe take a break until it heals. I'm sure AV stars know all the best health tips for these types of injuries. Dissected vertebral artery from a mouth hookup. Essentially a big brain hemorrhage. Did not end well either. My mom is a secretary at a hospital, so she had heard a few stories. Apparently a person had come in with a carrot stuck up their bum. Says it got stuck up there because he fell on it while they were cooking without clothes. I'd like to take this moment to thank everyone in this thread for making sure my genitalia never works again. Was working an ER rotation at a major DC hospital while getting my EMT. I wasn't around at the onset, but a gentleman came in complaining of swelling down there, and a nurse gave him a cursory look. She immediately took him into a private room, closed the door, and came over to tell us what was going on. The guy apparently liked to feel weight on his junk when he had personal time. He had put his junk through the center of a 5-pound weight plate, like you would when you do free weights. He did his business and then fell asleep. 5 hours later, he woke up swollen and unable to pull himself out of the weight. So he had somehow taken public transportation, or walked, with the 5-pound weight plate in his pants all the way to the hospital. We spent the next 30 minutes trying to reduce the swelling by putting crushed ice up against him without success. Finally, the charge nurse just called the DC Fire and EMS to get assistance with the heavy rescue squad to cut through the plate. We took the guy into the psych room, closed the door, and proceeded to cut it off. It being the weight, not his manhood. The entire time having to keep applying more ice to the plate so that it wouldn't become hot enough to cauterize his groin. The other patients really didn't appreciate hearing a buzzsaw, screaming, and seeing all of the ER staff giggling. Of course, the poor guy also had to deal with the constant stream of doctors, nurses, and techs having to go in there to check on something and see what was going on. I think this guy misunderstood how to get swole. My stepdad is an ER doctor in the only hospital in the city I was raised in. There was no place else to go when the hookup swing my idiot boyfriend hung on the drywall ceiling came crashing down and broke my tailbone. He was also there 6 months later when the same idiot boyfriend let go of my hips as I was visiting this town called Pound and was sent over the edge of a bed and headfirst into a desk. Sorry, Dad. Either this couple is really clumsy or they have an injury kink. We get inmates at my hospital because they're right down the road. They like to inflict injuries upon themselves to get out and spend a day here. The best from the inmates was a guy stuck a razor blade up his urethra, then proceeded to shove it up further with the pen. The pen put a hole in his urethra, and of course the razor shredded it. I think I'm gonna throw up after hearing that story. So I have a patient who came in due to a rash on his pee-pee. When asking about what caused the rash, he states, "I had a really rough hookup." Like really rough. I just nod my head and inform the doctor. We both give each other a what the freak look, and she proceeds to speak with the patient. The patient told her the true reason why he has the rash, and it was because he dry humped his girlfriend so roughly that he basically gave himself carpet burn on his pee-pee from his pants. No one ever talks about the dangers of the dry hump. Had this poor girl come into the ER a few weeks ago. Simple hookup went wrong case, and she was basically bleeding from her hoo-ha. They think she had some weak arteries down there and one must have just ruptured. Full disclosure, this happened to me. I noticed a small amount of bleeding immediately after. Later I noticed more, about the amount of menstruation. I laid a towel down and decided to go to bed. I felt a rush of fluid and made it to the bathroom before feeling faint and hitting the floor. I was able to call an ambulance from the floor. In the ambulance they said my face lips were blue from the loss of blood. One quick emergency surgery later and I was all stitched up and on my way home. Apparently I have weak arteries, which started as a small tear, broke open. So way back in medical school, all of us had to do 2 months rotation in OBGYN. This rotation was split up into a few weeks of labor ward, a couple weeks of gynecologic surgery, and a couple weeks of OBGYN ER. Our major county hospital had a small, separate ER just for pregnant women and those with purely gynecological complaints, to relieve some pressure off the medical and surgical ERs. So I'm sitting in the OBGYN ER with the residents one night, and about 2 a.m. we get an ambulance crew bringing in a youngish woman who is absolutely howling in pain and tell me to get a quick report from the EMTs, who had already talked to both the woman and her boyfriend, who they said would not be coming to the ER because he was busy talking to the police. Per the EMTs, the woman and her boyfriend had just been at her house hooking up. They had just finished their business and, as folks are meant to do, decided to light up a certain type of pipe and share it while they were unclothed on their couch. The boyfriend apparently went out to their car to grab grab something and inadvertently bumped the headlight switch. This caused the lights to flash, which the woman apparently interpreted as "the cops are coming" for some reason, and shoved the lit pipe into her hoo-ha. Obviously, this was excruciatingly painful, causing her to tense up and start frailing trying to get it out, which then caused parts of it to shatter, so now she had hot broken glass in her baby maker. I don't have a hoo-ha personally, but that story made my imaginary hoo-ha hurt. I'm a firefighter slash paramedic. Broken peepee, bent at a right angle about halfway. It's the second time he had it. His wife was on top and got carried away. It looked like they sacrificed a chicken on the bed. Not my call, but a paramedic was called to a 20-something male living in a ski resort town having groin pains. Arrived to find his pee-pee completely necrotic. His buddies had bet him that he couldn't stick it in a snowman for an hour. Perfect example of winning the battle, but losing the war. 26-year-old decided to be circumcised. His doctor told him not to hook up. He didn't listen. It peeled like a banana. Yep, that does it. I've had enough internet for the day after reading this. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.